Chapter 382. Puff. Lin soon coughed up blood and felt a sharp pain all over his body. Just now, he was suddenly attacked and oppressed by the terrible power of Tao Insight Realm, so he also suffered a lot of injuries. If he hadn't decisively withdrawn his saber and dodged at the critical moment, this blow alone would have been enough to kill him. The power of Tao Insight Realm could be seen from this. Hua Qianqing's sudden appearance surprised all the people present. This was the life-and-death duel proposed by Hua Wuyo. But now it was the Hua family who broke the rules. It was too shameless. However, to everyone's surprise, as soon as Hua Qianqing entered the arena, he didn't save Hua Wuyo in time. Instead, he flashed and slapped Lin Sun across the air. This was too much. Shameless. Some older overmatches couldn't help getting angry. Obviously, Hua Qianqing wanted to take this opportunity to kill Lin Sun. Damn it! Sure you, Ning Meng and others felt cold all over as if they had fallen into an ice cave. Hua Qianqing's shamelessness and ruthlessness were beyond their expectation. Despicable! Even some of the audience who looked down on Lin Sun before couldn't help frowning when they saw this scene. The Hua family was too unscrupulous. Boom. However, it was too late to say anything at this moment. An expanse of terrifying light condensed into a jet-black hand, and it rumbled as it crushed through space and slapped down towards Qin Shi. Lin Sun, who was only at the early stage of Sea Spirit Realm, suddenly became stiff. His qi and blood seemed to be frozen, as if he was oppressed by a towering mountain. There was no way to dodge. Even Lin Sun found it hard to resist the terrifying power of this palm swarm. However, in the face of this sudden situation, Lin Sun's expression was calm and indifferent. His figure stood towering on the spot while a wisp of bone-piercing coldness surged into his black eyes, and a jet-black and lustrous pearl had suddenly appeared in his palm. Whoosh! The pearl soared into the sky and revolved, and it was enshrouded with layer upon layer of dense and terrifying restrictions and markings. Moreover, a strand of obscure and terrifying fluctuation effused out along with it. Boom! An earth-shattering explosion came out. The arena was like a landslide and a tsunami. A terrible beam of light rushed up, crushing the void and annihilating the airflow. The entire arena trembled at this moment, emitting a sharp wail as if it couldn't bear the pressure. This scene was too terrifying. It was simply like an expert at the peak of the heavenly insight realm had displayed his might, and he intended to destroy the world and crush the world with his rage. That unimaginable destructive power caused many of the practitioners present to scream in fright, and they were extremely shocked. Even some great figures couldn't help but be visibly moved, their minds shaken. Bang! Amidst the smoke and dust, Hua Qianqing's skinny figure was sent flying, letting out an angry cry. Thump! A dignified paradise realm cultivator like him actually fell to the ground in a sorry state, and he suddenly spat out a mouthful of dark red blood. Hiss! Everyone was dumbstruck and flabbergasted. Trapped in a desperate situation, Lin Sun, who had no power to resist at all, resolved the disaster with just a bead. Moreover, he had severely injured Hua Qianqing, a Tao Insight Realm cultivator. This was the power of the heaven-shocking orb. This bead was a rare treasure that Green Turtle King refined to kill boredom when it was trapped in the ancient relic. For 1,000 years, Green Turtle King only refined 9 beads, which were powerful enough to severely injure a Tao Insight Realm practitioner. When leaving the ancient relic, Green Turtle King generously gave Lin Sun 3 beads, which had been hidden by Lin Sun and never had a chance to use. Now, as soon as it was used, the power was so strong that it shocked Lin Sun. Strong, too strong. It was worthy of the name, Heaven-Shocking Orb. A little rat should be so ruthless. Today, I will kill you on the spot regardless of my dignity as a warning to others. Hua Qianqing trembled with anger. Under the attention of thousands of people, he, a Tao Insight Realm cultivator, was injured by a bead from Lin Sun. It was a shame. Boom. Before he finished his words, Hua Qianqing attacked again. His beard and hair were fluttering, and his eyes were like bursting thunder. His power was so strong that the world changed. Rubbish! But at this moment, Hua Qianqing had lost the chance. When he took action, he heard an indifferent and dull voice. The voice was like the rebuke of Thunder God, frightening people's souls. Everyone only felt a blur in front of them. A majestic and powerful figure had appeared on the thunder and grabbed with his fan-like hand. With a bang, the void burst. Hua Qianqing seemed to be grasped by an invisible hand and was smashed to the ground. Many bones in his body were broken. He twitched all over and coughed up blood. There was a dead silence in the whole area. All eyes were fixed on the majestic figure that suddenly appeared, and their faces were full of horror. Hua Qianqing was a great practitioner of Tao Insight Realm. How powerful he was! But in the hands of this majestic man, he was suppressed to the ground like a chicken or a dog. It was too cruel. It was unimaginable. This majestic figure was naturally Zhu Laosan. He came with Lin Sun, so he couldn't tolerate Hua Qianqing's violence against Lin Sun. Zhu Laosan, kill him! Lin Sun said without hesitation in a cold voice. It was supposed to be a life-and-death duel, but this old bastard intervened. He not only made Lin Sun lose the chance to kill Hua Wuyo, but also almost killed him. Under such circumstances, how could Lin Sun be polite to Hua Qianqing? Zhu Laosan nodded and strode to Hua Qianqing. He looked indifferent and expressionless. His figure was majestic and powerful, showing an unparalleled spirit, which made all the people present change their faces. Lin Sun was really ruthless. Hua Qianqing probably didn't expect that such a change would happen after he intervened in the battle regardless of his face. How dare you? Do you think there's no one in my Hua family? A low and gloomy voice rumbled. A majestic man in white stood in front of Hua Qianqing. His sleeves were wide and he wore a wide belt. His demeanor was graceful, and just by standing there casually, there was a formless might to him. It was as if he was a king who had been in a high position for a long time, looking down on the world. Hua Qinglin. He was a famous Tao Insight Realm cultivator of Hua family. Now he was a lieutenant general of the Imperial Army. He had been on the battlefield for 50 years and killed countless fierce enemies. His hands were stained with blood. He was one of the 5 ferocious tigers of the Empire. Seeing Hua Qinglin stand out, all the people present couldn't help but gasp. The change of today's duel was too thrilling. Oh, you've gone too far. Lin Sun chuckled, and his black eyes were full of coldness. The rules were set by your Hua family, but they were broken by your Hua family. It's too shameless. Lin Sun was angry at the moment, and he didn't care about Hua Qinglin's identity at all. If that's all, it's not a big deal. But your Hua family sent a strong practitioner of Tao Insight Realm to kill me, a junior. Oh, I've never seen such a shameless old thing. His words were so rude that he almost pointed at Hua Qinglin's nose and scolded him. It was reasonable to think about it. This was the Tianwu arena. Since it was a duel, it had to be done according to the rules. Under the attention of the public, the Hua family went back on their words, trampled on the rules, and despised everything. Who wouldn't be angry if such a thing happened to them? Hua Qinglin narrowed his eyes slightly and said word by word, "Junior, you're courting death." He seemed to be elegant and graceful, but he was actually a ruthless character. Otherwise, he couldn't be ranked among the 5 tiger generals of the Empire. As soon as he finished speaking, his momentum suddenly changed. He seemed to be incarnated as a king on the battlefield, full of bloody killing intent. Almost at the same time, a terrible cold light flashed in Zhu Laosan's eyes, and his majestic body was full of iron-blooded killing intent. I can see that you're also a good fighter on the battlefield. Why do you work for this guy? Step back quickly, or I'll kill you according to the military rules. Perceiving Zhu Laosan's breath, Hua Qinglin narrowed his eyes and said in a low voice, like a general commanding thousands of troops and horses, giving orders. I've been retired for many years. You're not qualified to make me quit. Zhu Laosan was indifferent. Then don't blame me for being rude. Hua Qinglin snorted. A duel between two practitioners of Tao Insight Realm was about to start. At this moment a sigh was heard. General Hua, the Sky Martial Arts Arena is not the territory of your Hua family. A stout middle-aged man in brocade clothes and a small round hat appeared on the arena. His hands were hidden in his sleeves, and he looked like an honest businessman with a helpless expression. But no one dared to underestimate this middle-aged man, because his surname was Zhao Tailai, and he was the owner of the Sky Martial Arts Arena. Most importantly, Zhao Tailai was a member of the royal family. Seeing his appearance, many people couldn't help but be surprised. Zhao Tailai was smooth and slick, but he rarely got involved in such a storm. But now, he appeared abnormally and wanted to stop Hua Qinglin, which was too strange. You want to stop me? Hua Qinglin couldn't help but frown. It was your Hua family who broke the rules first. I'm here because I don't want this matter to continue to deteriorate. Zhao Tailai sighed deeply. What if I don't agree? Hua Qinglin's expression was cold. Others were afraid of Zhao Tailai's identity, but he wasn't. There were many kinds of members of the royal family, and Zhao Tailai was not worthy of his fear. Everyone in the arena was a little surprised. Hua Qinglin was too strong. It was the Hua family's fault, but he still dared to act so recklessly, which was surprising. But this was the style of the Hua family. Among the top 7 aristocratic families, the Hua family had always been known for their overbearing behavior. No, General Hua, you must agree this time. Unexpectedly, Zhao Tailai was extremely firm at this moment, and his expression didn't change. This is not only my attitude, but also General Hua, please reconsider. Hua Qinglin was shocked and fell into silence. Everyone present understood the underlying meaning behind his word. Zhao Tailai dared to stop Hua Qinglin in such a forceful manner. It turned out that what he represented wasn't just his own attitude. Simply put, someone asked Zhao Tailai to stop everything on his behalf. But who could order Zhao Tailai, the owner of the Sky Martial Arts Arena? Humph! In the end, Hua Qinglin snorted coldly and glanced at Lin Sun with eyes as cold as a blade. Then he strode out of the arena with Hua Qianqing and Hua Weiu. Seeing this, all the audience secretly breathed a sigh of relief. If Hua Qinglin went crazy at this time, it would be too terrible. It was already very good that the duel could be settled in this way. After all, in any case, Lin Sun survived in front of the overbearing Hua family. This result was already very good. However, no one expected that at this time, Lin Sun suddenly said, "Want to leave? It's not so easy. Zhu Laosan, take him down." His voice was loud and clear. Chapter 383. Want to leave? It's not that easy. Zhu Laosan, take him down. His powerful voice instantly caused an uproar in the audience. Was Lin out of his mind? Hua Qinglin had made a concession, but Lin Sun still didn't intend to let go. Did he really want to fight with Hua clan to death at this time? It was crazy. What on earth is this guy thinking? Sure Yu, Ning Meng and others were also confused by Lin Sun's bold move. This guy is looking for death on purpose. Lin Tianlong and others were also stunned, and then sneered. They were eager for Lin Sun to do so. It would be better if he could completely offend Hua clan. Little guy, don't be so shameless. Hua Qinglin suddenly stopped, and a wisp of undisguised killing intent appeared on his graceful face. Boom! Almost at the same time, Zhu Laosan took action. Without any hesitation, he rushed towards Hua Qinglin. It seemed that he didn't care about anything at all and only listened to Lin Sun's orders. Even if Lin Sun wanted him to die, he wouldn't frown. At this moment, even Zhao Tailai, the owner of Tianwu Arena, didn't expect such a thing to happen. He was stunned. Yes, He really didn't expect that Lin Sun would be so ruthless and desperate, which was completely beyond his expectation. That's enough. Stop it. But before Hua Qinglin and Zhu Laosan fought with each other, a flowing rainbow suddenly flew from the sky. That was a sword. The body of the sword was curved like a plum blossom. It was dull and rugged, covered with mottled copper rust. The sword fell as if falling from the sky. The sword fell and inserted into the center of the arena, just between Hua Qinglin and Zhu Laosan. In an instant the two stopped at the same time. Almost at the same time, the old voice sounded faintly and echoed in all directions. No one knew where it came from. However, when everyone present heard the voice, they felt inexplicable fear in their hearts. Their souls palpitated and they didn't dare to speak again. The atmosphere suddenly became incomparably silent. Looking at this strange sword shaped like a plum blossom and covered with copper rust, Hua Qinglin's face changed slightly. He seemed to be surprised and unwilling. Zhu Laosan also chose to be silent at this moment and dared not act rashly. It seemed that this sword had a terrible magic power, representing an invisible majesty, which made Hua Qinglin and Zhu Laosan, who were at the Tao Insight realm, extremely afraid. The expressions of some great figures of the older generation in the surroundings changed as well. They seemed to have recognized the origins of this sword, and they fell into silence in unison. On the other hand, those who didn't recognize this sword realized how serious the problem was when they witnessed this scene, and they were surprised and bewildered. Lin Sun didn't recognize the origin of the sword either, but he had vaguely guessed something. His dark eyes were deep and he was lost in thought. Previously, the reason why he fought with Zhu Laosan at all costs was that he didn't really intend to fight with Hua Qinglin to death. His true intention was to see if he could lure out some big shot in the dark when he made a ruckus regardless of everything. Now it seemed that he had succeeded. That strange mottled sword that looked like a plum blossom was definitely a symbol of status. The reason why Lin Sun could guess this was the sudden appearance of Zhao Tailai. He didn't know Zhao Tailai at all, but Zhao Tailai appeared at the last moment and resolved Hua Qinglin's suppression and revenge. Moreover, Zhao Tailai once said that he did all this not only because of his attitude, which proved that someone secretly instigated Zhao Tailai to do so. At that moment, Lin Sun suspected that the person in the dark was the big shot in the depths of the imperial palace. Everything in front of him had undoubtedly vaguely proved this point. Disperse. The old voice sounded faintly, as if giving an order. Hua Qinglin took a deep breath, cupped his hands to the mottled plum blossom sword on the ground, and then turned away. Come back, Zhu Laosan. Lin Sun also said. He had achieved his goal and could stop. Seeing this, all the people present seemed to wake up from a dream. They looked shocked and confused. It seemed that they didn't expect that a duel between young people would develop to such a point in the end. But anyway, the duel had come to an end. The end meant that the winner had been decided. Hua Wuyo was indeed defeated. Even if she was not killed in the end, today's duel was bound to be a heavy blow to her. And Lin Sun was destined to be famous in the Forbidden City with the power of this duel. He would become a talent that no one could ignore. Similarly, in this duel, the reputation of Hua family would also be affected. As one of the 7 top aristocratic families, Hua family reneged on its promise and trampled on the duel rules at will, which was a stain that couldn't be washed away and was despised by others. In particular, Hua Qianqing and Hua Qinglin, 2 Tao Insight realm cultivators, appeared on the arena one after another and intended to kill Lin Sun, a junior. This behavior was too overbearing and unreasonable. If it was spread out, it would also have a big blow to their prestige. However, Hua family was one of the 7 top aristocratic families after all. It was like an unshakable behemoth. In addition to a little notoriety, it could not bring any real blow to them at all. Boy, are you satisfied now? When Lin Sun withdrew from the arena, he met Zhao Tailai. The latter looked very unhappy and seemed to blame Lin Sun for making trouble for him. I'm not satisfied. Unexpectedly, Lin Sun said with a smile, unless you tell me the reason why you have to come forward to stop all this. You'd better save your breath. Zhao Tailai looked impatient. Go, go, go. You've caused too much trouble for me. You're a scourge. I can't afford to offend you, but can't I avoid you? Lin Sun smiled bitterly and was coaxed away all the way. But before he left, Zhao Tailai suddenly said, if you want to make trouble, go to Green Deer School. If you can make a mess there, that's your real ability. Lin Sun was stunned. Senior, did someone ask you to send this message to me? However, Zhao Tailai no longer paid any attention to him. He turned around and walked away, disappearing without a trace. Lin Sun stood there, lost in thought. Turn the world upside down? Before he stepped into the Forbidden City, a big shot from the Imperial Palace had sent him a letter, telling him that he could turn the Forbidden City upside down as much as he wanted. Combined with what he had experienced today and Zhao Tailai's ambiguous attitude, Lin Sun vaguely felt that all this had something to do with the big shot in the Imperial Palace. It's really not simple that this duel can attract so many forces' attention, Lin Sun thought. Smiles of Beauties. Ninth Heaven Pavilion. Compared with 3 days ago, there were only 5 people in the same place. Shi Yu, Ning Meng, Gong Ming, Yi Qi and Lin Sun, but the atmosphere was much more lively than that day. When men were together, they could not do without drinking. Just like when women were together, they could not do without exchanging makeup tip. In order to celebrate Lin Sun's victory, Shi Yu also took out the ice flame dew collected by his father, Fortune God Shi. There were 2 vats, whose value was hard to estimate. Everyone drank heartily and was in high spirits. Lin Sun's duel today could be called the most sensational event in the Forbidden City this year. There were too many things worth paying attention to in this duel. As the final winner, Lin Sun made Shi Yu's friends feel proud and honored. After 3 rounds of wine, 5 dishes were tasted. Shi Yu was drunk and said, when I left the Tianwu arena, I met Bai Lingshi and Zhao Yin. Do you know what Bai Lingshi said about this duel? Everyone couldn't help but be curious. Bai Lingshi could be regarded as a top girl in the bloodthirsty camp, and she won the 3rd place in the nation test with a strong background. It couldn't be better if they could listen to her opinion. Hey, she said Lin Sun was the same as before. Shi Yu chuckled. What does that mean? Ning Meng and others were stunned. Pervert. Shi Yu looked at them as if they were idiots. Everyone burst into laughter. Lin Sun was a little shocked and couldn't help saying, speaking of perverts, she should be better than me, right? Shi Yu said with a smile, one is a pervert, and the other is a pervert. You two can find a chance to fight. Maybe you can get married. If you can win Bai Lingshi's heart, the rise of your Lin family will be just around the corner. Ning Meng and others also laughed with a teasing look. Lin Sun's expression remained unchanged, but in the following time, he frequently competed with Shi Yu in drinking and soon got Shi Yu drunk. Seeing this, Ning Meng, Gong Ming and Yi Qi all realized that something was wrong and intended to retreat in advance. But they were stopped by Lin Sun and had another drinking contest. In the end, these young people were all drunk. They lay on the ground in disorder, their mouths mumbling incomprehensible words. Regardless of status, power, shrewdness, and resourcefulness, they were still very young after all. They were in the prime of their lives and had brilliant potential. In the following years, they might go their separate ways, fight in the north and the south, make friends with different people, and seek different ways of cultivation. But no matter what, the friendship made in their youth was destined to be unforgettable. In the same dark night, Qi Tsangmei walked in the bustling street. She frowned slightly, and the scenes in Tianwu Arena still flashed in her mind. Inexplicably, there was a touch of irritation in her heart. Lin Sun grew up too fast. The most frightening thing was that there was an enormous power hidden behind him that no one could see through. That was the most troublesome thing to deal with. Who do you think is better, Lin Sun or Tsang Feng? Qi Tsangmei asked suddenly. The Tsang Feng she mentioned was naturally Qi Tsangfeng. The old servant who followed her all the way muttered, Lin Sun is a little inferior. Master Tsang Feng has the bloodline of Purple Sea Golden Lotus. He can enter Tao Insight Realm in less than 3 years. Among his peers, few can compare with him. On the contrary, although Lin Sun finally defeated Hua Wuyo, he is much inferior in cultivation and talent. Qi Tsangmei shook her head. Your words are biased. It is obvious that you favor Tsang Feng. What's more, Tsang Feng can enter Tao Insight Realm in 3 years. Will Lin Sun not make any progress in these 3 years? Speaking of this, she took a deep breath and said, On the contrary, I have a hunch that if Lin Sun doesn't die in 3 years, the so-called talents and evildoers in the Forbidden City can no longer cover his light. At this time, there was a thunderous uproar in the distant street. Chapter 384. Even in the middle of the night, there were still a lot of people gathered in front of the spiritual screen. There was a roaring uproar from time to time. Most of these practitioners couldn't buy tickets to watch the duel between Lin Sun and Hua Wuyo. Therefore, they waited here and listened to the news from the spiritual screen. Qi Tsangmei was stunned. She was suddenly curious about what kind of evaluation these practitioners in the city would make on this duel. Thinking of this, she walked over there. Awesome! Lin Sun is absolutely a genius. He is only at the initial level of Sea Spirit Realm, but he can suppress Hua Wuyo. Who can imagine it? From being underestimated to a gorgeous counterattack at the last moment, this duel is really thrilling and wonderful. It's a pity that I can't see Lin Sun in person. Hey, I'd like to see who dares to say that Lin Sun is the weakest leader of the Forbidden City in the future. I don't know how Lin Sun cultivate. How can he be so powerful? With his fighting capacity, he can be among the top 5 even if he takes part in the nation test. When the news that Lin Sun finally suppressed Hua Wuyo came from the spiritual screen, there was an uproar in the field. All the practitioners couldn't hide their excitement. They didn't hide their amazement, surprise and admiration for Lin Sun. Almost no belittling voice could be heard. Qi Tsangmei couldn't help sighing with emotion in her heart. Hua family had always been famous for being overbearing, and Hua Wuyo was even called female Rakshasa. It was hard for people not to admire Lin Sun when they saw that Lin Sun defeated Hua Wuyo in a counterattack at the last moment. But soon, when they heard that Hua Qianqing ignored the rules at the last moment and attacked Lin Sun fiercely, the uproar in the field was replaced by abuse. The Hua family is too much. It's shameless. Hush. Keep your voice down. If you are heard by the Hua family, you can't protect yourself. What a joke. He has done such a shameless thing. Why can't people say it? As a great practitioner of Tao Insight Realm, he didn't care about his face and attacked Lin Sun, a junior, and wantonly trampled on the rules of the duel. This despicable behavior is really outrageous. The Hua family is indeed too strong. Fortunately, Lin Sun is blessed by God and averted the danger. Otherwise, if Lin Sun were to suffer a disaster, the Forbidden City would lose another genius. Damn it! How hateful! Hearing these curses, Qi Tsangmei was calm. So what if they cursed again? They could not cause a substantial blow to the Hua family at all. At most, it would only make the Hua family's reputation appear more domineering and ruthless. However, Qi Tsangmei had to admit that after this battle, Lin Sun not only did not suffer losses, but also won a lot of support and praise, which was a rare reputation. This was absolutely immeasurable benefits for him to establish a foothold in the Forbidden City and strengthen his momentum in the future. What? Even Hua Qinglin is on the move? This battle actually caused so many disturbances? What a pity. If I had known earlier, I would have gone to the Tianwu arena to take a look no matter what price I had to pay. Mysterious person? A mottled ancient sword shaped like a plum blossom? Just which monstrous figure's keepsake does this belong to? How could it make Hua Qinglin not dare to commit murder again? It's incredible. I can't figure it out. I really can't figure it out. Hearing this, Chi Tsangmei already knew that there was no need to listen anymore. Because no matter how many discussions there were in the field, they were doomed to guess the truth. After all, even as a descendant of Qi family, she had not figured out the reason yet, let alone these ordinary practitioners. The ancient sword of broken plum, as she walked, Chi Tsangmei thought in her heart, this is a murderous weapon that has been dormant in the royal family for many years. How could it suddenly appear today? Is there a force in the royal family behind Lin Sun? Although she couldn't figure it out, Chi Tsangmei was sure that after this incident, even if Hua family hated Lin Sun to the bone, they would not dare to act rashly before they could determine the force behind Lin Sun. Immediately, Chi Tsangmei couldn't help laughing at herself. Not only Hua family but also Qi family. When it came to the loss, Qi family would only suffer more in the encirclement and suppression action against Lin Sun. On the way back to the clan, Chi Tsangmei took a deep breath and suppressed the distractions in her heart. She also knew that although there was also a hidden force behind Lin Sun, there would only be more forces to kill him. Did Lin Sun want to stand firm in the Forbidden City with this battle? Impossible. It was early in the morning when Lin Sun left Smiles of Beauties. He was drunk. Lin Zhong carried him to the chariot and returned to Heart-Cleansing Peak. Drunk. Young Ko couldn't help frowning when she saw the drunk Lin Sun. It's good for him to be drunk. At least it proves that he either won the battle beautifully or lost miserably. Otherwise, under normal circumstances, he would not be in the mood to drink. Vulture smiled slightly. You're right. Young Master One. Lin Zhong replied with a smile, and then he told the details of today's battle. The ancient sword of broken plum? Hearing the last part, Vulture's clear eyes flashed a strange color. He said, no wonder he could force back Hua Qinglin. Lin Zhong didn't say much and helped the drunk Lin Sun to leave. What's the origin of this sword? Young Ko couldn't help asking. It's a murderous weapon. It's said that it was the sword of the founding emperor when he conquered the world. Because of too much killing and too much blood, the sword was sealed in the depths of the imperial palace. Vulture pondered. This sword hasn't appeared in the world for nearly 1,000 years, but it suddenly appeared in the battle between Lin Sun and Hua Wuyo today. It's not simple. I believe that Hua Qinglin also saw this, so he didn't dare to kill without authorization. You mean there's a big shot in the imperial palace behind Lin Sun? Young Ku was surprised. I'm not sure yet, but there must be a connection. After all, the origin of this sword is too special. It's the sword of the founding emperor and has been suppressed in the depths of the imperial palace for many years. It can't be an ordinary member of the royal family who can use it. Vulture suddenly thought of something. Do you remember that Lin Sun said that when he came to the Forbidden City, he was besieged by Qi family? Young Ku nodded. Of course, she remembered it. But after Lin Sun entered the Forbidden City, Qi family remained dormant. Perhaps Qi family also knew that there was a powerful force behind Lin Sun. Otherwise, it would be too easy for them to kill Lin Sun with the power of a superior aristocratic family. A meaningful smile appeared on Vulture's lips. Now, I'm sure that Lin Sun has some trump cards that we don't know. But he also has a lot of enemies. Young Ko reminded him. So, if he wants to lead Lin family to rise, the situation will become complicated, Vulture whispered. As everyone expected, the news about Lin Sun's victory over Hua Wuyo spread all over the Forbidden City overnight, causing a great disturbance. Some people marveled at Lin Sun's strength, while others disdained and abused the despicable behavior of Hua family. Someone was analyzing the origins of that ancient sword that resembled a plum blossom. Some people were keenly aware that Lin Sun was not just the heir of Lin family of Heart-Cleansing Peak. In a word, Lin Sun's name was completely popular in the Forbidden City. He was known by all and became the focus of discussion. His origin, identity, and strength had also become a hot topic of debate. It was said that the roar of anger rang for a whole day in the council hall of Westbrook Lin when they learned all this. Everyone was silent and no one dared to mention the name Lin Sun. But all the collateral clansmen of Lin family knew that Lin Sun of Heart-Cleansing Peak had become a famous figure in the Forbidden City. Some people were angry, some were shocked, and so on. But it was obviously impossible to make the three collateral forces of Westbrook, Floating Cloud and Flying Peak, submit to Lin Sun. But many people realized that if Lin Sun rose step by step according to this momentum, their situation would only become dangerous step by step. What should they do? No one knew, because even Lin Tianlong, Lin Yinshan and Lin Pingdu, the three leaders of the collateral forces of Lin family, were angry at the moment and couldn't come up with a clear solution. But in Northlight Lin, the situation was different. They were not happy for Lin Sun, but they were still very proud of him. Since the bloody event more than 10 years ago, Lin family's momentum had plummeted. It almost fell apart and completely declined. Many people in the Forbidden City even forgot the existence of the Lin family. Now, Lin Sun's strong rise would undoubtedly bring Lin family back to the public's attention. Even though there was still a long way to go to restore the glory of the past, it was enough to cheer up Lin family. The next morning, Lin Xiefeng went out to Heart-Cleansing Peak with the sincerity of Northlight Lin. When Lin Sun woke up, it was already dawn. The warm morning light sprinkled into the room and the air was fresh and pleasant. No matter how hard Lin tried, he could not remember who was the last one to get drunk in the Smiles of Beauties last night. Immediately, Lin Sun smiled, shook his head, got up and began to wash. Young master, Child Xiefeng came to visit and is waiting in Northlight Pavilion. Not long after Lin Sun washed up, Lin Zhong brought him breakfast and reported that Lin Xiefeng came to visit. Lin Sun was stunned and then said thoughtfully, "Northlight Pavilion? If I remember correctly, it was the place where Northlight Lin lived in those days, right?" Lin Zhong nodded with a smile. "It seems that young master has guessed it. Child Xiefeng may bring good news this time." Lin Sun smiled and got up. "Let's go and have a look." Chapter 385. In the past, the collateral and lineal branches of Lin family lived on Heart-Cleansing Peak. For example, Baiguang Pavilion was the original residence of Northlight Lin. Similarly, there were some residences on Heart-Cleansing Peak named Westbrook, Floating Cloud, and Flying Peak respectively. Naturally, they belonged to the other three collateral branches. Baiguang Pavilion. This was a row of ancient buildings. Most of them had been abandoned, but it was not difficult to see from the scale that it was once very lively with many clansmen living here. When Lin Sun arrived, he was surprised to find that a group of people were also rushing to Baiguang Pavilion. These people were sent by Baiguang ancestor some time ago. Most of them were very young and domineering. Just a few days ago, Ci Shui questioned Lin Sun because the spiritual medicine in the herb garden was trampled by these guys. At that time, Lin Sun didn't say a word of nonsense. He directly suppressed these playboys by force and assigned them to different places of Heart-Cleansing Peak to do some hard work that only servants could do. What Lin Sun didn't expect was that these guys gathered together at this time with an excited posture. When they saw Lin Sun, some of them couldn't help shouting, "Lin Sun, you made us do something that only lowly slaves could do. This time, you must ask Cousin Xiefeng to stand up for us and give us justice." "That's right, you obviously don't treat us as clansmen." All the young men and women were angry. As clansmen of Lin family, they were sent to Heart-Cleansing Peak as servants, which made them feel ashamed. They were afraid of Lin Sun's despotic power before, and they couldn't escape from Heart-Cleansing Peak with young Ku staring at them every day, so they had to bear it. But today was different. They were overjoyed when they heard that Lin Xiefeng had come. They thought that their savior had come. How could they bear it? So they gathered together and rushed to Lin Sun excitedly. Lin Sun was stunned for a moment, and then he laughed. These guys really needed to be taught a lesson. Obviously, it didn't cure their diseases when they were sent to do hard labor. What's the matter with you?" At this time, a figure came out of the main hall of Baiguang Pavilion. It was Lin Xiefeng. Brother Xiefeng, this guy has gone too far. He doesn't treat us as his clansmen. We came to Heart Cleansing Peak to do great things, but this guy forced us to do some cheap things. He also sent a ferocious woman to stare at us. If we dare to resist, we will suffer physical pain. You have to help us. The men and women shouted loudly, and they seemed to be filled with grief, indignation, and humiliation. But to their surprise, Lin Xiefeng didn't stand up for them after hearing all this. Instead, he looked at them with a gloomy expression. Kneel. Before they could figure it out, Lin Xiefeng had already said coldly. His voice was like a thunderclap that shook those men and women to tremble all over. Their faces changed in horror and they almost couldn't believe their ears. What was going on? Some people thought they heard it wrong and said, Brother Xiefeng, do you want Lin to kneel down, or, Pa? Lin Xiefeng slapped the man fiercely across the air. The man howled and fell more than 30 meters away, screaming incessantly. Everyone panicked and realized that something was wrong. Kneel down, Lin Xiefeng said again. This time, those men and women didn't dare to resist at all. They knelt down on the ground. Their faces changed like withered eggplant. A bunch of waste. You are sent here to serve Heart Cleansing Peak. But you are lazy and complaining. You are a disgrace to Lin family. Lin Xiefeng was really angry. He didn't expect that his clansmen should be so virtuous. You solve this matter. I'll wait for you inside. Lin Sun didn't want to be a bystander anymore. After all, this was an internal affair of Northlight Lin. It was enough for Lin Xiefeng to solve it. If he continued to stand by, he was afraid that it would make things awkward. Okay, wait a moment. Lin Xiefeng nodded. As soon as Lin Sun left, Lin Xiefeng's face became gloomy. He glanced at the clansmen kneeling in the remains. He was really angry and had a headache. Brother Xiefeng, why did you help him to teach us a lesson? Isn't this too absurd? Lin Sun has never regarded us as clansmen. At this time, someone summoned up his courage and asked, Idiot! Lin Xiefeng scolded them rudely. If he didn't treat you as clansmen, how could you be qualified to enter Heart Cleansing Peak? You should have died many times for your behavior just now. Everyone was stiff and doubtful. Obviously, they didn't believe it. Seeing this, Lin Xiefeng's face became colder and colder. He said, I'm not afraid to tell you that just yesterday, even Hua Wuyo was almost killed by Lin Sun. Do you think your life is more noble than Hua Wuyo? As soon as this remark came out, it was like a thunderbolt, which shocked those people. How dare he kill Hua Wuyo? Lin Sun was too arrogant, wasn't he? Looking at their expressions, Lin Xiefeng knew that these guys didn't know what happened in the Forbidden City these days. Otherwise, they wouldn't dare to disrespect Lin Sun at all even if they had 100 guts. Let me tell you, from today on, if anyone dares to disrespect Lin Sun again, I'll be the first one who won't spare him. Kneel there and think about it. Lin Xiefeng didn't want to explain more for a while. After saying this coldly, he turned around and walked into Northlight Pavilion. All of a sudden, those men and women were dumbfounded. In the main hall of Northlight Pavilion. My apologies, these clansmen are useless and have made you laugh. As soon as he came in, Lin Xiefeng cupped his hands apologetically. It doesn't matter. After all, they are our clansmen. It's enough to teach them a lesson. Lin Sun smiled and waved his hand. Lin Xiefeng nodded, sat on the other side and said with a smile, I'm entrusted by my father and grandfather this time to return some things kept by Northlight Lin to Heart Cleansing Peak. Lin Sun felt refreshed and said happily, Thank you so much. Lin Xiefeng said with a smile, Those things belong to Heart Cleansing Peak, but they have been kept by Northlight Lin all these years. Now that you are the master of Heart Cleansing Peak, you should return them to them. As he said, he took out a storage bracelet and handed it to Lin Sun. Among them, there are 1,733 ancient books, involving cultivation, martial arts, elixir scriptures, pharmacopoeia and so on. In addition, there are 3 heaven-rank elixir furnaces, 36 bottles of first-class spiritual seeds, 1,077 human-rank spiritual weapons, 650 earth-rank spiritual weapons, 110 heaven-rank spiritual weapons. Hearing this, Lin Sun's eyes gradually became bright. This time, Northlight Lin's sincerity was really enough. Obviously, after the battle with Hua Wuyo yesterday, Northlight Lin's attitude had greatly changed. They began to support him from the initial conservatism. Lin Xiefeng continued, in addition to these, there are 10 boxes of rare treasures, 77 spiritual birds and 42 spiritual beasts. After listing a lot of things, Lin Xiefeng said, I can't take spiritual birds and beasts with me, but my father will send someone to deliver them in the afternoon. Lin Sun was not happy at this time, but shocked. Northlight Lin's contribution was really generous. He had asked Lin Zhong to count the treasures plundered from Heart Cleansing Peak that year, so it was clear that Northlight Lin's return this time must be most of the items they took from Heart Cleansing Peak that year. Lin Sun stood up and cupped his hands, saying seriously, Cousin, please thank 5th Granduncle and Huiyuan Uncle for me. Just say that there is always a place for Northlight Lin on Heart Cleansing Peak. Lin Xiefeng also smiled. Wasn't he waiting for Lin Sun's words? We are all family. Don't mention it. Lin Xiefeng invited Lin Sun to sit down again, and then said, Lin Sun, I have decided to come to Heart Cleansing Peak to work for you from today. Of course, I will go to Green Deer School to practice later. But it's not important. What's important is that you just need to understand that from now on, I will fully support you to take charge of Heart Cleansing Peak. Lin Sun looked serious and serious. He was not joking. Lin Sun was stunned, and then he laughed and said, With your help, I don't need to worry about my success. Lin Xiefeng was a rare talent. Even though he might not be as good as Hua Wuhan and Hua Wuyo in cultivation, he was also a talent who successfully passed the nation test. Moreover, he was also the heir of Northlight Lin. With his full help, Lin Sun would definitely benefit greatly. After chatting for a while, Lin Xiefeng left. Lin Sun took Lin Zhong to the Sutras Pavilion and cleaned up the dust and cobwebs in it. Then he took out the ancient books from the storage bracelet left by Lin Xiefeng and began to put them in their original positions one by one. In the process, Lin Sun didn't speak. He looked calm and silent. From the first day he set foot on Heart Cleansing Peak, he had been here and vowed to take back all the things that had been taken away that year. He wanted to make the enemies who had robbed and harmed the Lin family pay a heavy price. Now, less than half a year later, he finally took a big step forward. It was a lie to say that he was not excited. But after many hardships, Lin Sun had learned to hide his inner emotions and become calm and mature. Most importantly, this was just the beginning. Lin Zhong looked excited. When Lin Sun appeared on Heart Cleansing Peak for the first time, he saw a glimmer of hope. Now, he had reason to believe that under the leadership of Lin Sun, Lin family of Heart Cleansing Peak would restore its former glory sooner or later. On the same day, Vulture and Young Ku also heard about it. They were surprised by the change of attitude of Northlight Lin. Chapter 386. The influence of Northlight Lin's strong support was absolutely amazing. In the next few days, Heart Cleansing Peak seemed to have changed. It was full of enthusiasm everywhere. In the elixir refining workshop, there were 30 more apprentices, all of whom were sent by Northlight Lin. Although they were young, they were flexible and skilled. So Shui didn't need to pay attention to trivial chores anymore. He could concentrate on refining elixirs and cultivating spiritual medicine. Moreover, these apprentices had great potential. As long as they were properly trained, they could become real pharmacists in the future. The rarest thing was that they were all surnamed Lin. They were all Lin clansmen. Their loyalty was more reliable. In the weapon forging workshop, there was also a group of apprentices helping Yang Ling. The division of labor was very clear. Some were responsible for purchasing spiritual ingredients, while others were responsible for filtering and smelting spiritual ingredient. Yang Ling only needed to give orders, and when everything was ready, he only needed to focus on weapon forging. Old Yao had repaired all the abandoned spiritual formations on Heart-Cleansing Peak with his exquisite spiritual tattoos. Because of the lack of manpower before, he needed to do the operation and maintenance of all the spiritual formations by himself. But now it was no longer necessary. These trivial things were all done by his subordinate. However, old Yao didn't stay idle. He was a spiritual tattooist. Under the dispatch of Vulture, he plunged directly into Yang Ling's weapon refining workshop and began to help refine spiritual weapons. It was worth mentioning that now, a batch of spiritual medicine would be produced in the elixir refining workshop every few days. Except for some of them for their own use, the rest were all sold to Keystone Business. Similarly, the spiritual weapons refined by the weapon refining workshop were also cooperated with Keystone Business. There was no need to worry about the sales. According to the daily statistics of Vulture, the elixir refining workshop and the weapon refining workshop could bring a net income of 30,000 gold coins to Heart-Cleansing Peak every month. The number seemed small, but it was just the beginning. As long as the output was steadily increased, the income would only be more and more in the future. This was the reason why Vulture tried his best to recruit C.I. Shui, Yang Ling and Old Yao. It was equivalent to planting a money tree for Heart-Cleansing Peak, which could guarantee a steady flow of financial income in the future. With money, it would be a piece of cake for him to recruit soldiers and expand his strength. In addition to these, the animal farm on Heart-Cleansing Peak was also put into use. A group of spirit birds and spirit beasts sent by Northlight Lin were now taken care of and domesticated by special animal tamers. When he first stepped into Heart-Cleansing Peak, he didn't even have a chariot. He could only rent it, which made him very embarrassed. However, it was different now. He had a group of spirit birds and beasts that could be used as mounts, so no matter if it was welcoming guests or going out, it was extremely convenient and fast. At the same time, Northlight Lin also sent a group of maids and servants to Heart-Cleansing Peak to serve them. After all, Lin Sun and Lin Zhong couldn't do such trivial things as serving tea, running errands and delivering messages. If a clan wanted to rise, it needed talents from all aspects. It was definitely not as simple as one might imagine. Nowadays, Heart-Cleansing Peak was no longer as barren as before. It began to become lively and new everywhere. All of this was naturally inseparable from Spirit Vulture's plan. It could be said that as long as Lin Sun made a decision, Vulture would definitely complete the rest perfectly. Of course, the most fundamental thing was that Heart-Cleansing Peak finally had money and its own forces. According to Vulture's plan, this was just the beginning. When Heart-Cleansing Peak really rose in the future, there were still many things to do. For example, promulgating and making new rules. For example, establishing an elite battalion of Lin family. After all, it was impossible for Lin Sun to fight alone once there was any conflict. In this case, he, the heir of Lin family, would be too tired to live. In a word, Heart-Cleansing Peak was recovering rapidly, but there were still many problems to be solved. With Vulture's overall planning, Lin Sun naturally didn't have to worry about these things. Now that he had handed over the financial power to Lin Zhong and the overall planning work to Vulture, Lin Sun himself was relieved of his burden. However, Lin Sun was not idle. In addition to practicing every day, he wandered around Heart-Cleansing Peak with Chirp. Seeing that everything on Heart-Cleansing Peak was running in an orderly manner and showing a trend of prosperity, Lin Sun was also very happy. It felt like a seedling that he had carefully cultivated finally began to thrive, which made people full of longing and hope. Time flies. It had been a month since the last duel with Huawuyo. That night, Lin Sun, as usual, meditated and practiced. His back was straight, and his whole body was covered with light purple spiritual light, which was like a dream. In the sea of qi in his body, the surging spiritual power was surging like a thunderbolt. It was faintly visible that over the spiritual power sea, there was a strange phenomenon of the sun and the moon and the stars. In the center of the spiritual power sea, there was a storm vortex, rolling up thousands of waves, across the sky and sea. This was the spiritual power sea that Lin Sun had opened up in his Sea of Qi after he reached Sea Spirit Realm. It was vast, magnificent, full of strange phenomena and unspeakable wonders. This represented a kind of transcendent talent, which was different from the ordinary and extremely special. After ordinary practitioners reached Sea Spirit Realm, the spiritual sea opened up by them could not be compared with Lin Sun at all, no matter in scale or thickness. As for the strange phenomena in the spiritual sea, there was no such thing at all. Only the talented and powerful geniuses could condense a strange phenomenon like Lin Sun when they reached Sea Spirit Realm. For example, Qi Tsongfeng was a well-known example in the Forbidden City. When he reached Sea Spirit Realm, he was only 13 years old. However, with the bloodline of Purple Sea Golden Lotus, the magnificent vision of divine rainbow piercing the sky and purple Qi coming from the east appeared in his spiritual sea. Because of this, Qi Tsongfeng became the most dazzling genius in the Forbidden City at a young age. It was true. In this year's nation test, he was successfully admitted by Green Deer School as the second place. However, if compared, it would be found that the strange phenomenon in Lin Sun's spiritual sea was more special and wonderful. The sun and the moon were hanging in the sky, surrounded by stars, and there was a storm vortex between the sky and sea. This was not only a strange phenomenon, but also a grand pattern. It vaguely contained Zhou Su and swallowed the universe, which could be called shocking. The fundamental reason why Lin Sun could fight against Hua Wuyo and was not inferior to Hua Wuyo in the confrontation of strength was that his Taoist root of spiritual sea was too unusual. Rumble with the operation of nature insight and spirit devour scripture, there was a roar in Lin Sun's body, as if there were mountains colliding with each other. His qi and blood seemed to be boiling, and every inch of his muscles and skin seemed to be tempered, producing an extremely obvious transformation. In his mind, the obscure and inexplicable voice of Taoist scripture of illusionary scripture kept echoing, making Lin Sun in a trance and completely forget himself when he was practicing. He seemed to be immersed in the Sanskrit sound of Great Way, and his cultivation speed was obviously accelerated a lot. 2 hours later, Lin Sun suddenly woke up from meditation and slowly stopped practicing, but there was a trace of surprise between his eyebrows. His progress was too fast. He had just reached Sea Spirit Realm for about 2 months, but now his cultivation was advancing at an amazing speed. It was rising every day, and now there was even a sign that he was about to break through the middle stage of Sea Spirit Realm. If it was any other cultivator, they would definitely be overjoyed to have such incredible progress in cultivation. But for Lin Sun, the rapid improvement of cultivation made him feel uncontrollable, which made him realize that something was wrong. Sometimes, the sharp improvement of cultivation was not necessarily a good thing. It was like a child suddenly possessing the strength of an adult, which was difficult to control and easy to hurt himself. Taking a deep breath, Lin Sun began to examine himself. After thinking for a long time, he couldn't help but smile wryly. He finally understood the reason. It was not that there was a problem with his cultivation foundation. It was because the cultivation resources he possessed were too heaven-defying for him to cultivate at the moment. First of all, his cultivation foundation was basically very strong, and the strange phenomenon in his spiritual sea was beyond the secular world. This gave him an unparalleled advantage. Originally, the more solid one's cultivation foundation was, the more difficult it would be to cultivate. But Lin Sun was different. The nature insight and spirit devour scripture he cultivated was a mysterious cultivation method inherited from the heaven accessing place. It was unfathomably wonderful, and when it was practiced, It would be extremely overbearing, devouring the sky and earth, and possessing extremely terrifying refining power. If Lin Sun's foundation was not extremely strong, he could not bear such an overbearing cultivation method at all. In addition, when he practiced now, the obscure sound of Taoist scripture of illusionary Taoism rang in his mind from time to time, which made him completely forget himself when he was practicing. It was as if he was immersed in the mysterious sound of Taoist Taoism, and his cultivation speed was also significantly accelerated. 1 day of cultivation was equivalent to 10 days of cultivation. In addition, every time he cultivated, he consumed a peerless spirit medicine like the snow infant jade ginseng, and its surging medicinal strength provided sufficient support for his cultivation. In this way, it was normal for his cultivation to progress so fast. Otherwise, it would be strange. Understanding this, Lin Sun felt much more at ease. More haste, less speed. His cultivation speed was too fast, which made his state of mind a little uncomfortable. He knew that the reason why he couldn't really control the power of constant transformation was that his state of mind lacked tempering. But how should he temper himself? Lin Sun walked out of the quiet room and walked out of Heart Cleansing Hall while thinking about it. It was already late at night. The sky was full of stars and clear light. The night wind was blowing gently, and the clouds were floating dreamily. There was also the unique fragrance of plants in the air. Suddenly, Lin Sun inadvertently glanced at a place not far away. Vulture was sitting alone in a wheelchair, looking up at the night sky, lost in thought. What was Vulture doing here so late at night? Chapter 387. Lin Sun stepped forward and asked in surprise, "Sir, you seem to have something on your mind?" Vulture looked at the starry sky and said calmly, "It's not a worry. I just need to prepare for something in advance." Lin Sun sat on one side of the ground casually, holding his knees and staring at the starry sky in the distance. "Can you tell me something? Speaking of which, these things are related to you." "Me?" "Yes." Vulture took back his eyes and looked at the angular side face of the young man beside him. He said, "Heart Cleansing Peak seems to be thriving now, but there are some hidden dangers." Lin Sun narrowed his eyes. "Sir, just say it." Heart Cleansing Peak lacks the real power to take charge of the overall situation after all. Vulture pondered. "You should know that Zhu Laosan will leave sooner or later. Although Shin Jingluan has the fighting spirit, he always regards himself as a servant. I'm afraid it's difficult for him to take the responsibility. Although the other 3 collateral forces of Lin family can't do anything to you for the time being, there are many strong practitioners of Tao Insight Realm in their family. Some of them even have strong practitioners of Reincarnation Developing Realm. As long as they seize the opportunity, they will definitely bring a fatal blow to Heart Cleansing Peak." Lin Sun was shocked and his expression became dignified. If this hidden danger is not solved, everything on Heart Cleansing Peak will be taken by others sooner or later. Vulture's eyes were full of wisdom. Even with the support of Northlight Lin, they are doomed to be of little help at that time. Lin Sun was silent for a moment and said, "Sir, do you have any plan to solve it?" Vulture thought for a long time and said, "It's too difficult unless you can ask the owner of Broken Plum to help you in person." "Impossible," Lin Sun denied directly. The other party would only support him, but it was impossible to ask the other party to help him solve the trouble. As for the Dark Templar, Lin Sun couldn't count on them. They had helped him too much. In the Forbidden City, the old man had made it clear that he would not interfere in his affairs. In this case, Lin Sun could only rely on himself to solve all this. Vulture pondered and said, "If you can keep Zhu Laosan here and recruit a real Tao Insight Realm strongman to work for you, maybe this hidden danger can be solved." "Leave Zhu Laosan here." Lin Sun's eyes brightened. He had thought about this problem, but he had never come up with a really good solution. "Do you have any ideas?" Lin Sun could not help asking. Vulture smiled and said, "I have been thinking about this problem before, but I don't have a specific way. But if you can cater to his interest and have a target, maybe you can make Zhu Laosan follow you wholeheartedly. Lin Sun immediately fell into contemplation. It was not easy to impress a powerful practitioner in Tao Insight realm. But what on earth could he take out to make Zhu Laosan stay? Lin Sun couldn't figure it out for a while. Women, money, power. It could be said that ordinary things were not attractive to powerhouses like Zhu Laosan. You don't have to worry about it anymore. Suddenly, a muffled voice resounded. Unknowingly, when old Zhu San's lofty and majestic figure was already standing in the distant night. Lin Sun was stunned. Vulture smiled slightly, as if he had expected that Zhu Laosan would appear. See, Spirit Realm cultivators can live for 300 years. Tao Insight Realm cultivators can live for 600 years. Now I have less than 2 years left in my life. Even if you keep me here, I can't solve your problem. Zhu Laosan said indifferently. Lin Sun was surprised and had a complicated mood. He didn't expect that Zhu Laosan only had less than 2 years left in his life. But this was the reality. Apart from all superficial fame, wealth and power, practitioners pursued the Tao. The most fundamental purpose was to prolong their life and achieve immortality. However, the path of cultivation was bound to be brutal. Since the ancient times until now, there had been countless extraordinary figures that were unable to break through for a long time, and in the end, they were defeated before time, causing their lifespans to dry up, causing their cultivations to disperse completely, and transforming into a pile of dirt on the ground that died with grievances. There were too many examples like this to count. Especially the higher one's cultivation was, the more difficult it was to break through. Once one was unable to break through, then even if one was a figure that possessed monstrous authority, one would still stop on the path towards the Tao in the end and perish. At present, Zhu Laosan was facing the problem of life and death when his life was about to run out. His cultivation was unparalleled and powerful, but no matter how powerful he was, he seemed too small in front of time. This was the road of cultivation. Every step was thorny and difficult. If you couldn't win, you were doomed to stop. Lin Sun was still young with infinite potential and rapid progress in cultivation, so he didn't realize this. But when he learned that Zhu Laosan's life was about to end, it still brought a great impact to him, which made him feel complicated and unable to control himself. Unexpectedly, Vulture suddenly said, "If you can break through the realm, this problem can be solved easily." Lin Sun shook his head secretly. If he could break through the realm early, how could Zhu Laosan wait until now? Sure enough, Zhu Laosan said indifferently, "It's impossible. My potential has been exhausted. I've tried to break through 37 times in these years, and all of them ended in failure without exception. I'm lucky to live until now." Who said it's impossible? A mysterious smile appeared on Vulture's lips. "I heard that there is a mysterious place called Wheel Developing Pagoda in the depths of the Imperial Palace. If you can enter it, there is at least a 50% chance to help you break through the realm." Deep in the Imperial Palace, Wheel Developing Pagoda. Lin Sun narrowed his eyes and vaguely realized that Vulture had begun to help him keep Zhu Laosan and pointed out a clear way for him. That's the Imperial Palace, like a forbidden place, and the Wheel Developing Pagoda is a forbidden place among forbidden places. Even most members of the royal family are not qualified to enter it. What you said is a delusion after all. Zhu Laosan was silent for a moment and said indifferently. He seemed to have given up and no longer had any hope of breaking through the realm. You can't do it, but it doesn't mean that Lin Sun can't. Vulture's expression was indifferent as he slowly said, "Just wait. Before your lifespan runs out, there might be a turning point. When that time comes, please don't refuse." Zhu Laosan was silent for a long time, and finally turned away without saying a word. No one knew what he was thinking, but as long as he didn't refuse, it already represented a kind of attitude. "How about it? Do you feel that it's more difficult to do it than to climb to the sky?" Vulture looked at Lin Sun. It's really tricky, but I'll try my best. Lin Sun took a deep breath and thought of the big shot in the depths of the Imperial Palace. Maybe he could help? Don't worry. There's still more than a year. It's not too late to decide whether to do it when you're fully prepared. Vulture said in a warm voice. Lin Sun nodded and suddenly remembered one thing. He stared at Vulture and said, Mister, I heard that you were poisoned with devil calamity powder. Is this poison really incurable? Vulture guessed what Lin Sun wanted to do in one sentence. He couldn't help but be speechless. He waved his hand and said, Don't waste your time. Even in the Empire of the Dark, very few people can cure this poison. I don't expect to restore my cultivation in this life. I think it's worth a try. Lin Sun smiled slightly. If it weren't for your reminder tonight, I would almost forget it. As long as the problem can be solved, there will be one more strong practitioner of Tao Insight Realm on Heart Cleansing Peak. Vulture was surprised. You seem to be very confident. Lin Sun said, I just suddenly thought of a way to kill many birds with one stone. Vulture asked, What way? Lin Sun gently spat out 2 words, offer a reward. Gather the wisdom of the whole world to find a way to solve devil calamity powder for you. Vulture said calmly, What are you going to offer? There are few rewards that can attract the attention of the whole world. How dare you say so? He obviously didn't believe it. Lin Sun smiled slightly. When I was cultivating in Mist City, I was protected by a friend of mine in Tao Insight Realm. He saved me more than once and gave me a lot of help. When I wanted to repay his kindness, he said that if I had the ability in the future, it would be enough to refine a set of armor with spiritual tattoos for him. At that time, I realized that the armor with spiritual tattoos was definitely a treasure that could attract practitioners above Tao Insight Realm. After a pause, he continued, Mister, if I tell the whole world that I will refine a set of armor with spiritual tattoos for whoever can solve the problem of devil calamity powder, who will refuse? Refine armor with spiritual tattoos. Even with Vulture's calm state of mind, he couldn't help but gasp at this moment. Chen's eyes were filled with shock and disbelief. He didn't expect that Lin Sun, a young boy, dared to boast that he could refine armor with spiritual tattoos. This was simply unimaginable. What was the armor with spiritual tattoos? It was the most precious treasure in the aristocratic families. Even some aristocratic families didn't have the ability to have a set of armor with spiritual tattoos at all. The reason was that it was too difficult to refine. Even if a spiritual tattoo master made it, the success rate was extremely low. Nowadays, the Academy of Spiritual Implements of the Empire gathered a group of outstanding spiritual tattoo masters, and there were even some spiritual tattoo masters. Even so, it would take at least 3 months to successfully refine a set of armor with spiritual tattoos. Most importantly, as soon as the armor with spiritual tattoos made by the Academy of Spiritual Implements of the Empire came out, it would be snatched up by the royal family, the military ministry and the 7 top aristocratic families. It was impossible for it to be distributed to the outside world. The rarer a thing was, the more precious it was. Not to mention a treasure like the armor with spiritual tattoos. In today's empire, if someone dared to say that he could customize a set of armor with spiritual tattoos for him, not to mention the practitioners in Tao Insight Realm, even the practitioners in Reincarnation Developing Realm would rush to grab it. This was the value of the armor with spiritual tattoos. Chapter 388. After being stunned for a long time, Vulture couldn't help asking, Can you really do it? Lin Sun answered frankly, I haven't done it yet, so I don't know. Vulture immediately rolled his eyes. He was a wise and steady person, yet he rolled his eyes at this moment. It was clear that he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. But I can give it a try. Have you forgotten that the new Xing battleship of the Empire was designed by me? Lin Sun smiled slightly. He had to give Vulture some confidence instead of letting him mistakenly think that he was just a braggart. Vulture reminded him seriously, but Zing battleship is different from the armor with spiritual tattoos after all. Lin Sun thought for a moment, took out his flowing light saber, and handed it to Vulture. Vulture was stunned. He took the saber in his hand and looked at it. Just a moment later, his eyes burst with a gleam of light. Spiritual treasure? These two words proved how sharp Vulture's eyes were. Lin Sun nodded. I made it in Mist City last year. Now, you should believe that I have the potential to refine armor with spiritual tattoos, right? Vulture nodded. Indeed, this is enough to prove your talent and potential in spiritual tattoos, but, speaking of this, he couldn't help but show a touch of self-mockery. Don't say that I'm discouraging you. Armor with spiritual tattoos is also different from spiritual treasures. Before Lin Sun could speak, Vulture took a deep breath and said, Well, let's not talk about this. I just want to ask you, what do you mean by killing many birds with one stone? Lin Sun thought for a moment and said, You will understand later. It's just empty talk now. Only when I really refine armor with spiritual tattoos can I achieve this step. Vulture was stunned for a while and then said with a smile, Well, I'll wait and see. Through the conversation with Lin Sun, Vulture couldn't help but have a little expectation in his heart. He wanted to see whether the young man in front of him could really give him an unexpected surprise. From this day on, Lin Sun adjusted his daily practice plan. He put all his energy into reviewing and honing spiritual tattoos during the daytime. Spiritual tattoos was the most familiar path that Lin Sun had been exposed to since he was a child. During his learning under Master Lu, Lin Sun had mastered the solid foundation of spiritual tattoos and the unimaginable means of spiritual tattoos. When he entered Feiyun village, he used spiritual tattoos to help the villagers eradicate pests in the spiritual fields and successfully integrated into the village. In the bloodthirsty camp, he helped Old Mo design the brand-new Zing battleship and refine the Meteor's crossbow. Since then, he had received the full attention of Young Man, Young Ku, Shu Sanchi and Old Mo. Old Mo had more than once sighed with emotion that Lin's attainments and potential in spiritual tattoos were comparable to or even better than the genius girl Feng Qinyu in Green Deer School. At that time, it was also because of Lin's attainments in spiritual tattoos that Shu Sanchi cherished his talent and didn't let Lin be taken away by Shinrudi. And Old Mo shouldered some unnecessary disturbances and influences for Lin Sun. Later, in Mist City, Lin passed the assessment of the commune of spiritual tattooists by means of spiritual tattoos and won the friendship of Chu Feng. Even Lu Qinyan, the leading art practitioner in the empire, asked Lin to repair the ancient rhythm ocarina, which was finally repaired successfully. At that time, Lin Sun refined the spiritual treasure, flowing lightsaber, which shocked Shu Jin and Granny Wind. They thought that Lin Sun's strength in spiritual tattoos was rare in the world. However, since he left Mist City and entered the Forbidden City, Lin Sun had no energy to practice spiritual tattoos because he was entangled with various things. Now, whether it was to solve the problem of Zhu Laosan's promotion or to help Vulture solve the poison of Devil Calamity powder, the only way Lin Sun could think of was spiritual tattoos. As long as he could refine armors with spiritual tattoos, there would be hope in front of him. Inscribing pen, spiritual ink carrier. Every day, Lin Sun was like an old monk meditating on Zen. Sitting at the desk, he used his surging spiritual perception power as the guide and the spiritual ink of the inscribing pen as the medium to inscribe spiritual tattoos on animal skins, rocks, fallen leaves, paper and cloth. Everything on heart-cleansing peak, and all the noise in the outside world, seemed to have nothing to do with Lin Sun. There were only spiritual tattoos in his eyes. There were only mysterious tracks of spiritual tattoos in his heart. His mind was filled with complex and unpredictable patterns of spiritual formations. 10 days later, Lin Sun no longer sat in the room. He wandered on heart-cleansing peak with empty hands. He hesitated in front of the waterfall, sat or crouched in the grass and flowers, stood on the edge of the lightning cliff, or lingered among the rugged rocks. He used his fingers as the inscribing pen, his perception as the control, and his own spiritual power as the source to inscribe mysterious tracks of spiritual tattoos on the rocks, the soil and the surface of grass and leaves. Later, he began to inscribe in the clouds, waterfalls and haze. In the eyes of others, Lin Sun seemed to be possessed. He ran around on Heart-Cleansing Peak every day and drew some spiritual tattoos that no one understood. His behavior seemed very strange. Although it was strange, no one stopped him because it was Vulture's order. Only Vulture knew what Lin Sun was doing. In the blink of an eye, another month had passed. Autumn passed and winter came. Everything on Heart-Cleansing Peak was dead. Only some exotic flowers and grasses were swaying in the cold wind. Lin Sun didn't go out, as if he had disappeared in silence. The discussion about him in the outside world was no longer as lively as before. After all, as the capital of the empire, there were many new and sensational events happening every day in the Forbidden City. It was obviously impossible for people to remember him all the time. In these days, the most sensational thing was that Water Barbarian branch of Voodoo Barbarian tribe sent a large delegation to visit the Forbidden City. There was an irreconcilable hatred between the Empire and Voodoo Barbarian branch. They confronted each other all the year round. The sudden visit of this Water Barbarian branch emissary group naturally attracted the attention of all parties. It also set off a great uproar in the entire Forbidden City. Many forces were speculating about the purpose of the Water Barbarian branch's envoy. But it was strange that since this envoy group arrived at the Forbidden City, they settled in an ancient building in the west of the city, specially provided by the Empire's royal family. They neither went out to visit nor revealed their purpose of coming to the Forbidden City. This abnormal behavior made the people in the Forbidden City confused. But anyway, because of the hatred between the Empire and Voodoo Barbarian tribe, many hot-blooded young people went to the barbarian residence to make trouble every day. They threatened to kill these alien bastards and avenge the Empire's soldiers who died on the battlefield. The barbarian residence was the residence of the Water Barbarian branch's delegation. It could be seen from the name that the Empire's attitude towards foreign envoys could be seen. However, no matter how much trouble they made, the Water Barbarian branch's delegation just didn't show up. It seemed that they planned to stay in the Forbidden City for a long time. The imperial family's attitude was also quite strange. They ignored this delegation as if they didn't exist. This was too unusual. Unfortunately, no one knew the reason. As time went by, they found that this Water Barbarian branch's delegation didn't do anything out of line, so the forces in the Forbidden City didn't bother to pay attention to it. In addition, these days, the three collateral forces of Westbrook Lin, Floating Cloud Lin and Flying Peak Lin were also in trouble. The industries owned by them were frequently suppressed by competitors in recent days and even maliciously lowered prices, which seriously affected their wealth and income. On this day, as usual, Lin Tianlong, the leader of Westbrook Lin, listened to the latest news reported by his subordinate. Patriarch, the spiritual mine of blood iron under our control had an accident yesterday. Just like a few days ago, all the produced blood iron was rejected by the buyers. They said that the quality of our blood iron was too poor and asked us to sell it at the price of 30 gold ingots per kilo. But if so, we will lose a lot. We can't even break even, let alone make money. In addition, there are also 6 spiritual grain stores in the west of the city and 3 elixir stores in the south of the city. Their business is also bleak and no one cares about them. According to this calculation, we have lost 390,000 gold ingots in this month alone. If this situation continues, within a year, our industries, I'm afraid that it will be difficult to maintain. The subordinate said bitterly with a sad face. Lin Tianlong's face was also gloomy and cold. He gnashed his teeth with hatred. They had gone too far. Someone must be targeting them secretly. He had long noticed that something was wrong, but until now, he was finally sure that this was a premeditated malicious attack. Patriarch, not only are Westbrook Lynn, but also the industries owned by Floating Cloud Lynn and Flying Peak Lynn have been severely hit like ours, the subordinate reminded, but the industries owned by Northlight Lynn have not been affected at all, and their business is better than before. This is not right. Do you think? Is it possible that Northlight Lynn and the boy on Heart Cleansing Peak are behind this? Nonsense. Even if they didn't do it, it must be related to them. Lin Tianlong roared. He was almost unable to control his inner anger. At the same time, he was a little surprised and doubtful. Ordinary forces could not hit them by such insidious means. With Lin Sun's ability, even with the support of Northlight Lin, it was absolutely impossible for him to do this. At this moment, a middle-aged man in gray rushed in anxiously. Before he arrived, he had already reported quickly, "Patriarch, I've found out that the murderers who have been targeting us these days are from the Shi family of Keystone House, the Ning family of the Iron Blood Army of the Empire, the Gong family of the Tumbler, and the Yi family of King of Donghai." Chapter 389. After an unknown period of time, Lin Tianlong finally recovered from his state of extreme shock and anger. His face had already become incomparably ashen. "You've gone too far. You've gone too far." In the end, Lin Tianlong couldn't bear it. He roared like a beast, which made the two subordinates kneel on the ground. "Do you want to make Westbrook Lin yield in this despicable way? Don't even think about it." Bang! Lin Tianlong slapped down, and the table in front of him exploded into powder. At this moment, his entire body emitted a violent aura, and he was like a ferocious beast that had been driven mad. His eyes were completely red, as if he was bloodthirsty, and he was terrifying to the extreme. But after a long time, Lin Tianlong sat back in the chair. His eyes were blank and his eyebrows were full of confusion. Keystone business was terrible enough. Now there were the Ning family of Iron Blood Army, the unfailing Gong family and the Yi family, King of Donghai. Lin Tianlong couldn't bring himself to fight against them at all. They were too powerful. Even if Lin Tianlong knew that his opponents were Westbrook Lin, he also knew that with the foundation of Westbrook Lin, even if he united with Floating Cloud Lin and Flying Peak Lin, he was still no match for them. The only thing that made Lin Tianlong glad was that this was only a loss on the business road. The other side had not shown any signs of dealing with Westbrook Lin directly. But if they let this situation continue, sooner or later, Westbrook Lin would be completely unable to hold on. A clan also needed resources to support itself. Without resources, it wouldn't be long before the clan would fall apart. Lin Sun. It was all Lin Sun's fault. Since this damn thing returned to Heart Cleansing Peak, he hadn't stopped for a day. If he didn't kill him, it would be hard to relieve his hatred. For the first time in his life, Lin Tianlong hated a person so much. But the reality was cruel after all. Lin Sun hid in Heart Cleansing Peak and was protected by masters. Lin Tianlong had no way to kill him. What should he do? Lin Tianlong was confused and fell into deep thinking. This situation not only happened in Westbrook Lin, but also in Floating Cloud Lin and Flying Peak Lin collateral forces. This was the revenge from Lin Sun. Sure, you proposed to unite Ning Meng, Gong Ming, and Yi Qi to invite their respective clans to retaliate against the three collateral forces of Westbrook Lin, Floating Cloud Lin, and Flying Peak Lin family. They didn't even need to fight head-on to deal a heavy blow. Lin Sun knew about the plan, but everything was arranged by Shiryu. Therefore, Lin Sun didn't know that Westbrook, Floating Cloud and Flying Peak had fallen into a storm and suffered a lot. Time flew by. It had been 2 months since Lin Sun reviewed the spiritual tattoo. On Heart Cleansing Peak, under the overall arrangement of Vulture, everything was developing in an orderly manner. It was thriving and there was a sign of a gradual rise. Everyone was busy, and even Qiuqiu had been invited by Yang Ling to head to the weapon forging workshop to take on the role of a smelting master. But all this had nothing to do with Lin Sun at present. At this moment, his long hair was draped over his shoulders, and his beard was lush and messy. He seemed to be unkempt, and only his pair of black eyes were deep and bright. Lin Sun squatted on a muddy ground with a quiet and focused look. His dusty fingers were sketching on the ground at will. A wisp of light cyan spiritual energy, like a condensed tip of a brush, was driven by the surging spiritual perception power to inscribe a series of trajectories. His movements were as smooth as flowing water, without the slightest trace of worldly aura. It was as if he naturally existed there. Before long, Lin Sun raised his finger and got up casually. When he was about to leave, he suddenly had a foreboding. He stopped and stared at the muddy ground again. On the spiritual tattoo pattern he had just inscribed, a light green sprout broke out of the soil, and then grew at an amazing speed, pulling out the stem and giving birth to the leaves in the blink of an eye. A foot-long phoenix-tail grass with tender green branches and leaves had matured and swayed in the wind. Looking at the ground, the spiritual tattoo had long disappeared. A smile quietly appeared on Lin Sun's lips. His smile was extremely brilliant, because this scene represented that he had finally reached the level of spirit nurturing in spiritual tattoos. The so-called spirit nurturing was to breed spirituality with the magic of spiritual tattoos. For example, the phoenix-tail grass just now was awakened by a wood spiritual tattoo and produced a unique spirituality. As if it was alive, it grew rapidly in the blink of an eye. This was like turning stone into gold. It seemed small and inconspicuous, but it had the power to turn something rotten into something magical. This kind of power was called spirit nurturing in spiritual tattoos. In today's world, only the real masters of spiritual tattoos were qualified to comprehend and master the mystery of spirit nurturing. And the masters of spiritual tattoos who could finally master the attainments of spirit nurturing were absolutely few, like the existence of phoenix feathers and unicorn horns. Because this step was too difficult. It was like the Creator endowing some objects with spirituality by means of spiritual tattoos, so that they seemed to have a soul and life. It was too mysterious and obscure. Some masters of spiritual tattoos worked hard for a lifetime, but if they were not talented enough, it was impossible for them to touch the threshold of spirit nurturing. At least as far as Lin Sun knew, with old Mo's attainments in spiritual tattoos, he was still a step away from mastering spirit nurturing. Although it was only a step away, it was like a door in front of him. Inside the door was a world, and outside the door was a new world. They were two completely different realms. In the Empire, it was generally acknowledged that only masters of spiritual tattoos, who mastered the means of spirit nurturing, had the potential to become a grandmaster of spiritual tattoos. Only masters of spiritual tattoos, who had mastered the means of spirit nurturing, could have the capital to refine armors with spiritual tattoos. Compared with old Mo, it could be imagined how amazing and extraordinary it was for Lin Sun to master the means of spirit nurturing at such a young age. If it was spread out, no one would believe that such a young man could be a master of spiritual tattoos who had mastered the attainments of spirit nurturing. However, all this was only a difficult thing for Lin Sun, but not a great thing. Because when he was very young, Master Lu had shown him many means of spirit nurturing. Master Lu once said in a careless tone, "Soul nurturing? Humph, it's nothing. It just proves that you are a real qualified spiritual tattooist. There is still a long way to go." This sentence was still fresh in Lin Sun's memory. When he was young, he thought that only by mastering spirit nurturing could he grow from a spiritual apprentice to a respected spiritual tattooist. But now he had grown up, and he naturally knew that spirit nurturing might not be a big deal for Master Lu, but for most spiritual tattooists in the world, it was a natural mote. It was not something that could be achieved easily. I can start preparing now. Lin Sun took a deep breath and murmured. His eyes became bright and firm, glowing with an indescribable spirit. He was no longer as crazy as he was a few days ago. In his mind, all the insights about spiritual tattoos that he had comprehended and practiced these days had settled down and turned into Lin Sun's attainments in spiritual tattoos. What surprised Lin Sun most was that after these days of practice, his cultivation had become more and more condensed and had reached the consummation level, and there was a sign that he would break through the middle stage of sea spirit realm at any time. More importantly, when the surging spiritual energy ran through his body, he felt that he could control it as if it was his own arm and finger. There was no sign that he could not control it because of the sharp rise in cultivation. This was the unexpected benefit of practicing spiritual tattoos. Every time he inscribed spiritual tattoos, he needed to control and manipulate his own spiritual energy precisely, which was like practicing saber. After thousands of times of practice, he would inevitably become skilled and smooth, and could control it freely. 7 days later, in the weapon refining workshop, looking at the 12 refined spiritual weapon embryos in front of him, Yang Ling couldn't help but smile with satisfaction. These 12 embryos included sabers, spears, sword chi, axes, hooks, and forks, with completely different styles and type. Lin Sun asked him to refine them, and each of them could be refined into a real earth-rank spiritual weapon by a spiritual tattooist. But what puzzled Yang Ling was what Lin Sun wanted to do with these embryos. Before long, Lin Sun appeared in the weapon refining workshop. Looking at the embryos prepared by Yang Ling, he was also quite satisfied. Yang Ling was indeed a rare talent on the path of forging. At the very least, the spiritual weapon embryos that he had forged could be considered exquisite. At this time, Lin Sun's long hair had been tied up, and his beard was shaved clean. He was tall and graceful, and his demeanor was extraordinary. He put away the 12 spirit artifact embryos and instructed, in the following period of time, help me continue to forge spirit artifact embryos. All of them will be forged according to the standards of Earth-rank spirit artifact. I will send someone to collect them. After that, Lin Sun left in a hurry. Yang Ling was stunned and confused. Was this young master going to refine spiritual weapons by himself? Before, he had also heard that Lin Sun was also a spiritual tattooist. The latest Ziying battleship of the Empire was designed by Lin Sun. However, Yang Ling still couldn't understand why Lin Sun, as the master of heart-cleansing peak and a genius in cultivation, would put aside his proper business and play with these things. It was more than just neglecting his proper business. There was a sign that he lost his mind because of playing with things. Yang Ling finally couldn't help telling Old Diao what he thought. Old Diao was also surprised and didn't understand what Lin Sun was going to do. So Old Diao told C.I. Shui. It didn't take long for everyone on Heart Cleansing Peak to know that Lin Sun, the young master of Heart Cleansing Peak, didn't do his proper business but went to refine spiritual weapons. This made many people worried. Now Heart Cleansing Peak was thriving. If Lin Sun indulged in other things instead of doing his proper business, what should they do? Young Ku was the only one who knew that Lin Sun was a talented spiritual tattooist, not to mention that he was a talented spiritual tattooist. Of course, Young Ku was also very curious about what kind of treasure Lin Sun was going to refine after months of preparation. Vulture knew some reasons, but he couldn't tell them. After all, refining armors with spiritual tattoos was too shocking. If it was known, it would cause a great disturbance. Of course, Vulture was still sure that what Lin Sun was going to refine at present was definitely not armors with spiritual tattoos, because armors with spiritual tattoos could not be refined by spiritual weapon embryos at all. So, what was Lin Sun going to do at this time? Chapter 390. In everyone's expectation, 7 days passed quickly. Lin Sun had been practicing on the 3rd floor of Heart Cleansing Hall. He never went out or showed up at all, so others couldn't know what he was doing. Soon, many people lost their patience. Only young Ku and Vulture kept paying attention to him. On this day, Lin Zhong came out of Heart Cleansing Hall. Young Ku and Vulture both looked at him. In the past 7 days, Lin Zhong had been waiting on the 3rd floor of Heart Cleansing Hall. Now he finally came out. Had Lin Sun come out? But to young Ku and Vulture's surprise, Lin Zhong's look was indescribably weird at this time. There was a trance between his eyebrows, as if he had encountered something extremely shocking and incomprehensible. What was wrong with him? Young Ku couldn't help asking. Lin Zhong seemed to wake up from a dream. He couldn't help but smile bitterly and said, "It's hard to imagine." As he spoke, he brought young Ku and Vulture to a secret room, and with a flick of his sleeve, 12 spirit weapons that were overflowing with rays of light appeared. Suddenly, the room was illuminated by a bright light, which was gorgeous and dazzling. Sabers, spears, swords, halberds, axes, battle-axes, hooks, forks, a total of 12 spiritual weapons glowed with 12 completely different breath. In particular, one of the spiritual sabers was constantly singing in the void, steaming with purple haze. It was dreamy and psychic, releasing an oppressive sharp breath. The air around it made a tearing sound, as if it was wailing. There was no need for Lin Zhong to explain at all. Young Ku and Vulture were shocked and stared at each other in silence. 12 low-grade Earth-rank spiritual weapons. After a long time, young Ku took a deep breath and said slowly. There was no doubt that Lin Sun was refining spiritual weapons in the past 7 days. But what she didn't expect was that Lin Sun had refined 12 Earth-rank spiritual weapons in only 7 days. In other words, he could refine 2 Earth-rank spiritual weapons almost every day. His refining speed was amazing. Earth-rank spiritual weapons were not comparable to human-rank spiritual weapons. Only Spirit Sea Realm cultivators could perfectly control a spirit weapon of this level and display its full power, but it was extremely troublesome to refine. Generally speaking, it would take a senior spiritual tattoo master at least 3 to 5 days to refine an Earth-rank spiritual weapon. In this way, it could be seen that Lin Sun's refining speed was abnormal. What surprised young Ku the most was that she clearly remembered that Lin Sun took 12 spiritual weapon embryos from Yang Ling last time, and now there were also 12 Earth-rank spiritual weapons in front of her. What did this mean? It meant that Lin Sun had achieved a perfect success rate in refining weapons without any failure. Young Ku couldn't help but be shocked by Lin Sun, a young spiritual tattooist, who had an abnormal refining speed and an unimaginable success rate. Even though she had long known that Lin Sun's attainments in spiritual tattoos were extremely extraordinary, she still couldn't imagine how he did it. It was incredible! Just as young Ku's heart was shaking endlessly, Vulture also spoke. His clear eyes were filled with surprise as he said, "One of them is even an earthly rank spirit treasure." Spirit treasure? It was a treasure that could only be found by chance. It had unimaginable power, as if it had been blessed by God. It was extremely magical. In the whole empire, there were many spiritual tattooists with great attainments in spiritual tattoos, but only a few of them could refine spirit treasures. But Lin Sun not only refined 12 spiritual weapons in the past 7 days, but also one of them was a God-given spirit treasure, which made Vulture unable to keep calm. It was terrifying to think about it. In today's world, although 15-year-old young spiritual tattooists were rare, they were not non-existent. But it was impossible to find one who could refine 2 Earth-rank spiritual weapons in 1 day like Lin Sun, and one of them was even a spirit treasure. At this time, young Ku and Vulture finally understood why Lin Zhong looked so absent-minded when he saw him just now. Anyone who saw this scene would not be able to keep calm. After all this seemed to be beyond imagination. Young Master said that except for the purple soul saber, all the other spiritual weapons can be used as prizes for meritorious people. After a while, Lin Zhong said, "His decision is not bad. Treasured spirit tools like this definitely cannot be sold. Vulture agreed with him. Prizes? He is smart. He only needs to carry out some assessment activities. With these spiritual weapons as rewards, it is enough to select some real talent. Young Ku was thoughtful. She came from bloodthirsty camp, so she knew the so-called assessment and reward rules very well. With these spiritual weapons as rewards, it would be easy to select some talents in heart-cleansing peak in the future. Before long, Lin Zhong left and went to the weapon refining workshop to get another 16 spiritual weapon embryos from Yang Ling. Then he returned to the third floor of Heart Cleansing Hall and gave these embryos to Lin Sun. Another 7 days passed. Lin Zhong walked out of Heart Cleansing Hall again. This surprised Young Ku and Vulture. They thought that it would take more time for Lin Sun to refine 16 spiritual weapons this time, since it took him 7 days to refine 12 spiritual weapons last time. But obviously they guessed wrong. What surprised them most was that Lin Zhong had seen great winds and waves, and he had seen Lin Sun's extraordinary attainments in spiritual tattoos last time. But this time when he walked out of Heart Cleansing Hall, Lin Zhong was still in a trance and shocked, which seemed unusual. Soon, Lin Zhong gave the answer. In 7 days, Lin Sun successfully refined 16 Earth-rank spiritual weapons without any failure. Different from the last time, 2 spiritual treasures were produced this time. Hearing this, Young Ku and Vulture's eyes were fixed at the same time. Spiritual treasures could only be found by chance. A spiritual tattooist could be proud to refine one spiritual treasure in his life. But for Lin Sun, refining spiritual treasures seemed to be no longer an untouchable problem. Last time, he refined 12 Earth-rank spiritual weapons in 7 days, only one of which was a spiritual treasure. Vulture heaved a long sigh and sighed with emotion. And now, in the same 7 days, he has refined 16 Earth-rank spiritual weapons, 2 of which are spiritual treasures. His progress in spiritual tattoos is really heaven-defying. Young Ku was also shocked and speechless for a while. The 2 spiritual treasures refined this time were also kept by Lin Sun, a pair of copper maces and a heart-protecting armor. As for other spiritual weapons, Lin Zhong handed them over to Vulture, who would deal with them. As time went on, another 7 days passed. This time, Lin Sun refined 19 Earth-rank spiritual weapons, but this time 2 spiritual treasures were produced, and there was no breakthrough. But even so, Young Ku and Vulture were shocked and lost their manners. Fortunately, after this refining, Lin Sun ended this vigorous action, which made Young Ku and Vulture feel relieved. To be honest, if Lin Sun continued to refine spiritual weapons, they doubted whether their hearts could bear the ensuing shock. Through these days of observation, Vulture no longer doubted whether Lin Sun could refine the armor with spiritual tattoos as before. Even he couldn't help looking forward to it. At least Lin Sun's current attainments in spiritual tattoos had proved that he had the potential to refine armor with spiritual tattoos. If it were any other spiritual tattooist, he might not be qualified to do so in his lifetime. In the cultivation chamber on the 3rd floor of Heart Cleansing Hall, Lin Sun lay on the ground, panting, and his forehead was covered with sweat. He was chewing a piece of snow ginseng in his mouth, and the surging and pure medicinal power was constantly replenishing the almost exhausted spiritual energy in his body. In these days, in addition to meditation, he was refining spiritual weapons crazily and refining his spiritual tattoos. This kind of high-intensity exercise was also amazing. He not only refined a large number of high-quality Earth-rank spiritual weapons, but also refined 5 spiritual treasures. In addition, his cultivation in the early stage of Sea Spirit Realm, which had already reached the mastery, also broke through and stepped into the middle stage of Sea Spirit Realm. With his current fighting capacity, if he met Hua Wuyo again, he could definitely defeat him easily, without the twists and turns before. At the same time, the improvement of his cultivation also further improved the power of his soul. Now in the sea of his consciousness, there were 900 spiritual stars lit up. The bright and dreamy starlight filled the sea of his consciousness, bathing his soul in it, showing a wonderful picture. The improvement of the power of his soul was also extremely significant for refining spiritual weapons, so that Lin Sun could more easily and accurately control and manipulate the inscribing pen and spiritual ink when inscribing spiritual tattoos. The reason why he could refine spiritual weapons so fast these days was that after the promotion of his cultivation, the power of his soul was further strengthened, which promoted all this. Very quickly, the last remaining stem of the snow infant jade ginseng was completely refined. The dry sea of qi in Lin Sun's body was full again, filled with the vast light cyan spiritual energy. The sun and the moon shone together, the stars hung down, and the storm whirlpool stretched across the sky and the sea, becoming more magnificent and immeasurable. Lin Sun stood up. His black eyes were clear, and his posture was straight and elegant. Between his movements, there was a lofty and transcendent momentum. Without any delay, Lin Sun walked out of the adytum and went straight to Heart Cleansing Hall to find Lin Zhong. "Grandad Zhong, are those spiritual treasures ready?" Lin Sun asked. "Young master, they are all ready." "Well, send them to Shi Yu, Ningmeng, Yi Qi and Gong Ming respectively." Lin Sun gave an order and immediately said, "After this, you and Zhu Laosan will go out with me." "Where are you going, young master?" Lin Zhong was stunned. It had been 3 months since the fight with Hua Wuyo. Lin Sun had been hiding in Heart Cleansing Peak, and had never gone out. What was he going to do this time? Chapter 391. Keystone Business. Shi Yu crossed his legs and looked at Lin Xueting with a frown. Lin Xueting smiled, her expression unchanging. He was Lin Xiefeng's cousin. He was smart and good at socializing. This time, he was sent by Lin Zhong to give Shi Yu a gift from Lin Sun. The gift was sealed in a jade box in Lin Xueting's hand. "Don't blame me for being rude. Lin Sun is too polite. Why does he suddenly want to give me a gift?" Shi Yu was a little confused. Lin Xueting said respectfully, "I'm only responsible for running errands. I don't know anything else. Child, open the jade box and have a look at the gift inside. Maybe you can find something." Shi Yu suddenly smiled with a touch of pride on his face. "Do you think Keystone Business is short of any treasures? Take it away. Go back and tell Lin Sun that if he dares to be so polite next time, don't come to see me in the future." Lin Xueting smiled bitterly. "If you don't accept it, I can't explain it when I go back." Shi Yu snorted coldly. "Oh, Lin Sun is really bad-tempered now." Lin Xueting shook his head quickly. "Child, you misunderstood. Lin Sun has no such intention. Even if you don't accept it, at least take a look at it. If the gift really can't satisfy you, I can take it back and explain it." Shi Yu said impatiently, "Well, open it. I want to see what Lin Sun is up to." Lin Xueting immediately opened the jade box. In the blink of an eye, a dark green light suddenly appeared, and a bone-piercing chill spread out, causing a layer of frost to condense in the air. At the beginning, Shi Yu didn't care much about it. He just wanted to take a look at it and then send Lin Xueting away. He was still a little dissatisfied with Lin Sun's behavior. But when he looked at it, his eyes were immediately fixed on the jade box and couldn't move away at all. A pair of bronze maces lay quietly in the jade box. The bronze maces were 2 feet and 4 inches long. They were as thick as candles, and their entire bodies were engraved with dense and obscure spirit patterns. They were emitting a frightening, cold, and dark green spirit light. The weapon Shi Yu was most proficient in was the bronze truncheon, and he himself used a pair of precious earth-rank bronze truncheons called the Dragon Stamp Jade Truncheons. It was personally refined by a famous spirit rune grandmaster, and it was extremely difficult to buy. But compared to the pile of bronze truncheons in the jade box, they instantly seemed much dimmer, to the extent that they were somewhat lacking. With a swoosh, Shi Yu stood up and took out the pair of bronze maces from the jade box. After sizing them up briefly, a wisp of light instantly shot out explosively from his eyes. Spirit treasure. This was a pair of earth-rank spirit treasures. An unconcealable excitement appeared on Sure Yu's face. His eyes were filled with infatuation. This pair of bronze maces were too perfect. Just by holding them in his hands, he felt as if they were connected by blood. "Is young master satisfied?" Lin Xueting asked softly. "Satisfied, very satisfied. Lin Sun, the bastard, has given me an unexpected surprise." Sure Yu laughed heartily, beaming with joy. A spirit treasure of such quality was truly too rare. It wasn't that its quality was high, but it was too difficult to find, and it could be said to be something that could only be chanced upon by luck. "What is the name of this treasure?" "I haven't named it yet. Cousin Lin Sun said that it's most appropriate for you to name it yourself." "Ha ha ha, Lin Sun really knows my mind. Then I'll call it Green Cloud Truncheon." "Rising through heaven, what a good name!" Lin Xueting laughed. A wisp of pride couldn't help but surge into his heart, and he felt honored as well. The same thing happened to Ning Meng, Gong Ming, and Yi Qi. Lin Sun gave each of them a silver halberd chasing moon, a rock rod, and a spring embroidery scimitar. All of them were earth-rank spirit treasures. Ning Meng and others were also very happy and surprised. They loved them as if they had gotten the most precious treasures. This was the reward from Lin Sun. During these days, Sure Yu and others secretly added fuel to the fire and carried out business suppression against the three collateral forces of Westbrook Lin, Floating Cloud Lin, and Flying Peak Lin, making these three collateral forces fall into a whirlpool of troubles and disturbances. How could Lin Sun forget such kindness? Therefore, when refining spiritual weapons, he also specially refined a spirit treasure for each of them as a token of his appreciation. Of course, Lin Sun also refined a saber for himself, an earth-rank spirit treasure named Purple Soul. As for Flowing Light Saber, although it was a spirit treasure, it was only a middle-grade human-rank spirit treasure after all. Its power could not satisfy Lin Sun, who was at the middle stage of Sea Spirit Realm. A chariot drove out of Heart-Cleansing Peak and carried Lin Sun to the headquarters of the commune of spiritual tattooists. It didn't take long for Lin Tianlong, the leader of Westbrook Lin, to receive the news. He gritted his teeth and roared, "This little thing finally shows up. Send my order to invite the heads of Floating Cloud Lin and Flying Peak Lin to come quickly. There's something important to discuss with them." Just 10 minutes later, Lin Yinshan and Lin Pingdu had come in a hurry. They were also excited to know that Lin Sun, who had been hiding in Heart-Cleansing Peak for several months, finally showed up. The lives of these three clans were too miserable these past few days. The businesses under their command suffered repeated suppression, and they had to lose almost 1 million gold coins every single month. This caused their respective clans to encounter endless troubles and disturbances to arise from all directions, causing them to be overwrought and unable to eat or sleep in peace. Although all this was done by several major forces such as Keystone Business, in the final analysis, it was all thanks to Lin Sun. Under such circumstances, how could they not hate Lin Sun? Up to now, they had no hope of recapturing Heart-Cleansing Peak. They just thought about how to kill Lin Sun and completely solve the present disaster. Everyone, Lin Sun finally left Heart-Cleansing Peak today. This is undoubtedly the best opportunity for us to kill him. Lin Tianlong's face was cold and gloomy, and his killing intent was overflowing. However, he has been protected by Zhu Laosan and Lin Zhong. If we fight him head-on, the result is unpredictable. Do you have any countermeasures? Zhu Laosan. Hearing this name, Lin Yinshan and Lin Pingdu's excitement suddenly disappeared. This was a fierce and ruthless person who could easily suppress Hua Qianqing and dare to confront Hua Qinglin, one of the 5 tigers of the empire. How could he be ordinary? Although Lin Zhong was an old servant who guarded Heart-Cleansing Peak, he was also a Tao Insight Realm Master. With their protection, it could be imagined how difficult it was to kill Lin Sun. If we can invite any of the ancestors of our 3 clans to take action, maybe this problem can be solved. Lin Yenshan hesitated and said, "No." Lin Tianlong immediately denied. The ancestors need to stay in the clan. Once they take action, if something happens in the clan, the consequences will be unpredictable. This plan is too risky. We can't do it. Then, invite some powerful people of Tao Insight Realm to take action with us? Lin Pingdu said in a deep voice. No, it's still too risky. It's not the time to fight with Lin Sun. Lin Tianlong denied again. Suddenly, Lin Yenshan and Lin Pingdu were silent. The opportunity finally came, but they faced great challenges, which made them not know what to do. At this time, a subordinate came to report that Lin Sun had gone to the headquarters of the commune of spiritual tattooists. Hearing this, Lin Tianlong was stunned. What is he doing there? Does he want to recruit some spiritual tattooists to work for him? Lin Yenshan seemed to think of something and laughed. I have an idea. Suddenly, Lin Tianlong and Lin Pingdu looked at Lin Yenshan. What is it? I have a close friend who is now working in the headquarters of the commune of spiritual tattooists. He is a real spiritual tattooist with great power. If we can ask him to help us, we can even control Lin Sun completely without leaving a trace. Lin Yenshan's eyes were shining and he looked excited. Is that true? Lin Tianlong also showed joy. Ho, I can guarantee it. Zhu Laosan and Lin Zhong can't protect Lin Sun after he enters the headquarters of the commune of spiritual tattooists. As long as we send Chu Loxi to cooperate with my close friend Lin Yenshan's eyes flashed a touch of ruthlessness when he said this. At that time, Lin Sun will definitely be doomed. May I know who your close friend is? Lin Pingdu couldn't help asking. When it's done, you two will naturally understand. Lin Yenshan smiled slightly and kept them guessing. Lin Tianlong immediately made a decision. Let's do it. There's no time to lose. Let's start now. The headquarters of the commune of spiritual tattooists. Young man, are you also here to be certified as a spiritual tattooist? An old man looked at the young man in front of him in surprise. Yes. Lin Sun nodded. Ho, great. If a young spiritual tattooist apprentice like you can pass the certification and become a real spiritual tattooist, it will be a glorious thing for your ancestors. The old man said with a smile. Come on, pay a fee of 1,000 imperial gold coins and get a token. Before he finished, Lin Sun shook his head with a smile. Sorry, I'm here to be certified as a spiritual tattooist. What? The old man was stunned and opened his eyes wide in disbelief. Lin Sun handed over the token representing the identity of a primary spiritual tattooist and said, Please have a look. The old man took it in his hand and looked at it. His expression suddenly became strange. It turns out that you are already a spiritual tattooist at such a young age. Immediately, he scratched his head and said with a look of disbelief, But you are so young. Do you really want to be certified as a spiritual tattooist? Are you sure? Lin Sun smiled and said nothing. Seeing this, the old man took a deep breath and thought for a moment. Then he waved his hand to call a waiter and said, Take this young man to the examination hall of the master level. The waiter was also stunned and looked at Lin Sun with a strange look, but finally he held back his surprise and took Lin Sun away. Hey, young people nowadays are really impetuous. He is just a junior spiritual tattooist, not even an intermediate or senior spiritual tattooist, but he dares to clamor to come here to be certified as a spiritual tattooist. This is too ridiculous. The old man shook his head with a smile. He had figured it out. Since the young man could be certified as a junior spiritual tattooist at such a young age, he must be quite talented in spiritual tattoos. However, his character was too exaggerated and arrogant. How could the certification of a spiritual tattooist be passed so easily? Chapter 392. The hall was magnificent, with many stone pillars standing, and the space was unimaginably large. Around the hall there were many chairs, and in the center there was a black jade platform with a radius of 300 meters. On the black jade platform there were 9 stone steels. Each steel was 30 meters high, mottled and full of the traces of time, as if it had existed from ancient times to the present, majestic and solemn. This was the Grandmaster Assessment Hall. The black jade platform was called Dragon Gate Platform, and the 9 ancient stone steels on it were the famous 9 tablets of Dragon Gate, which were worshipped by countless spiritual tattooists fanatically. When Lin Sun arrived here under the guidance of a waiter, the seats in the hall had already been filled with many figures. Among these figures, there were either dignified middle-aged men with extraordinary bearing or gray-haired old men. Relatively speaking, there were very few young people, and even fewer teenagers like Lin Sun. Looking around, Lin Sun couldn't find many. "Child, please wait here. When the certification begins, you just need to go to the Dragon Gate platform to take the assessment according to the rules," the waiter explained in a low voice and hurried away. Lin Sun found a seat at random and sat down, looking at the Dragon Gate platform in the center of the hall. Before he came here, he had learned that to be certified as a spiritual tattooist, he needed to pass the assessment of 9 tablets of Dragon Gate. Outsiders couldn't intervene in the assessment process, so the fairness of the certification assessment was ensured. Of course, if the spiritual tattooist was not strong enough, it was impossible to muddle through, which also put an end to the situation of making up the number. It could be said that as long as the spiritual tattooist passed the assessment of 9 tablets of Dragon Gate, he was absolutely a real powerful existence. However, it wasn't that easy to pass the test. Suddenly, a discussion in the distance attracted Lin Sun's attention. "I heard that today, even Senior Qing Jing, a high-level spiritual tattooist of Academy of Spiritual Implements, Senior Shen Tuo, the chief spiritual tattooist of Green Deer School, and some big shots with extraordinary attainments in spiritual tattoos have now arrived at the headquarters of the Commune of Spiritual Tattooists. Ho-ho, only a brilliant figure like Hai Dong can attract so many big shots at once. Yes, Hai Dong has been immersed in the path of spiritual tattoos for more than 10 years. This time, he can successfully pass the 9 tests of the Dragon Gate." Everyone discussed, and their words were filled with praise as they looked at a black-clothed young man. The young man had an imposing appearance. His eyebrows were as black as ink and his eyes were bright. He looked quite handsome. In the face of everyone's flattery, he smiled and cupped his hands together. "Seniors, you're too kind. I, Chu Haidong, can't get to where I am today without the care and guidance of the seniors." "Haidong, you are too humble." "That's right. We came here to cheer for you. You must perform well." The old and middle-aged men spoke in unison, and their words were filled with encouragement and praise. "Chu clan?" Lin Sun was stunned. In the Forbidden City there were 3 spiritual tattoo families, namely Chu family, Feng family and Mo family. Since the young man named Chu Haidong dared to come to be certified as a spiritual tattoo master, he must be from the Chu family, one of the 3 spiritual tattoo aristocratic families. This suddenly reminded Lin Sun of Chu Feng in Mist City. Chu Feng was also from the Chu family, but he was expelled from the Chu family because of a storm and had to hide in Mist City. Thinking of this, Lin Sun was tempted. He still didn't know why Chu Feng was expelled that year. If there was a chance, he could inquire about Chu Feng. But Lin Sun didn't intend to do so now, so as not to cause any unnecessary trouble. In the following time, Lin Sun roughly judged the identity of other people in the hall through observation. To Lin Sun's surprise, only 4 or 5 of them, including Chu Haidong, were going to be certified as spiritual tattoo masters today. As for the others, almost all of them were spiritual tattooists. They either came to observe and learn, or to cheer for Chu Haidong and other practitioners who participated in the certification. The middle-aged and old men around Chu Haidong were all from the Chu family, and each of them was a spiritual tattooist. There were about a dozen of them, which was very eye-catching. From this, it could be seen that as one of the 3 spiritual tattoo aristocratic families, Chu family had a profound foundation in spiritual tattoos. Hey Lin Sun? Suddenly, a voice sounded in the distance, full of surprise. Lin Sun was in a daze. He looked up and saw a strange man in yellow sitting not far away, looking at him in surprise. Lin Sun? Many people raised their heads, attracted by the commotion. Why are you here? Are you also here to participate in the certification of spiritual tattooist? The yellow-clothed man was so surprised and loud that it was hard for others not to notice him. Before Lin Sun opened his mouth, someone asked, "Dude, which Lin Sun are you talking about? Who else can it be?" The Lin Sun who defeated Hua Wuo a while ago and became famous in the Forbidden City. The yellow-clothed man looked very excited, as if he had found a big secret. Hearing this, there was an uproar in the hall. It turns out that he is Lin Sun. He is as young as the legend says. The duel between him and Hua Wuyo caused a sensation in the whole Forbidden City. Lin Sun was praised as the pride of the young generation. But why is he here? Many people looked at Lin Sun with curiosity, as if they were looking at a monster. Lin Sun smiled bitterly in his heart. It turned out that he was so famous now, which surprised him. Lin Sun, are you really going to participate in the certification of spiritual tattooist? The yellow-clothed man asked again. Lin Sun saw that the man had no malice and was just curious, so he nodded and took it as an answer. But his action made the yellow-clothed man extremely excited at once. He exclaimed, "My God, the master of heart-cleansing peak, the outstanding talent of the young generation, is going to be certified as a spiritual tattooist. If this news is spread to the Forbidden City, it will cause a sensation." His expression was filled with praise while his voice was loud, and it caused a wave of restlessness in the surroundings. Many people couldn't help but reveal expressions of shock and disbelief. What? Did Lin Sun really come to be certified as a spiritual tattooist? This was incredible! Who dared to imagine that a young talent with dazzling aptitude in cultivation would suddenly change his identity and want to be certified as a spiritual rune grandmaster in the field of spiritual runes? This was too shocking. Lin Sun understood this very well. After all, even Vulture was stunned for a long time when he knew his decision for the first time. In this uproar and shock, someone suddenly sneered, "Ridiculous! A 10-year-old boy wants to be a spiritual tattooist? It's ridiculous." It was a white-haired old man sitting next to Chu Haidong. Everyone in the hall immediately recognized that this old man was a senior spiritual tattooist of Chu family, named Chu Yunkong. Chu Yunkong suddenly opened his mouth and questioned Lin Sun rudely, which made many people wake up. Yes, Lin Sun was only a 10-year-old. How could he become a spiritual tattooist? Lin Sun smiled and didn't bother to explain to him. But his silence made Chu Yunkong more convinced that Lin Sun came here purely to make up the number. He sneered and said, "Almost all of you here are spiritual tattooists. You must know how difficult it is to become a real spiritual tattooist. It's like a natural chasm. Only 1 in 10,000 can cross it." Many people nodded secretly. Indeed, a spiritual tattooist was too unusual. One must have superb talent and foundation in spiritual tattoos to be able to achieve this step. Chu Yunkong continued, "I'm not talented. Limited by my mediocre aptitude, I've exhausted all my efforts and energy but haven't been able to break through to the level of a spiritual tattooist. Now I'm still just a senior spiritual tattooist." After a pause, he sneered, "Under such circumstances, a 10-year-old boy wants to be certified as a spiritual tattooist. This is ridiculous. How arrogant he is. How ignorant he is." The first part was okay, but the second part was too rude, which was no different from directly pointing at Lin Sun's nose and scolding him. Everyone couldn't help feeling surprised and doubtful. Although Chu Yunkong's words were harsh, what he said was the truth. Lin Sun was only a 10-year-old. Why did he dare to be certified as a spiritual tattooist? Did he think that anyone could become a spiritual tattooist at will? All of a sudden, the way people looked at Lin soon changed. Being scolded by an old guy and stared at suspiciously by others, even a good-tempered person would find it hard to bear. What's more, Lin Sun was never a good-tempered person. On the contrary, he was absolutely a vicious person who would seek revenge for the slightest grievance and was never willing to suffer losses. Uncle, it's not good to take advantage of your seniority. You're so old, but you still can't control your mouth. Don't you know that a loose tongue brings disaster? Have you ever heard of a saying? It's called an old man who doesn't die is a thief. Lin soon began to fight back. His voice was indifferent, but every word was clearly heard by everyone present. Suddenly, many people were stunned. Lin Sun's counterattack was really vicious. He actually scolded Chu Yunkong as an old man. As expected, Chu Yunkong's face darkened with anger. "Little boy, you are presumptuous." The clansmen around him also looked gloomy and unkind. However, Lin Sun didn't care and said with a smile, "Uncle, everyone is watching. I didn't say a word just now, but you satirized me again and again. Who do you think is more presumptuous? I've always respected the old and cherished the young. It's a pity that you don't know how to respect yourself and have such a foul mouth. I'm embarrassed to let you sing a monologue there again and again." You. Chu Yunkong didn't expect Lin Sun to be so cunning and vicious. He was so angry that his eyes were about to pop and his lungs were about to explode. At this time, Chu Haidong couldn't help but frown and say first, "Lin Sun, what my uncle said just now may be a little extreme, but everything he said is true. If you don't agree with him, you don't have to take it so seriously." Seeing Chu Haidong also stand out, Lin Sun couldn't help frowning. A touch of disdain suddenly appeared at the corner of his mouth, and he gently spat out 2 words, "Idiot! You're courting death." Chu Haidong's eyes turned cold and he shouted angrily. Chapter 393. Blood for blood, a tooth for a tooth. Lin Sun scolded Chu Haidong lightly. His next words were simply a stroke of genius. He gave Chu Haidong a taste of his own medicine, sharp, decisive, and neat. Everyone couldn't help showing a strange look. Lin Sun was really willing to go all out. Chu Haidong's face suddenly turned livid. He gritted his teeth and said, "Are you really going to be the enemy of our Chu family?" Lin Sun said with a smile, "That depends on your attitude." "Good, very good. Today, I'd like to see whether you can pass the certification of a spiritual tattooist with your ability." Chu Haidong took a deep breath and suppressed his anger. He didn't continue to lose his temper, but said in a cold tone word by word, "When the result comes out, it will prove who is ignorant and who is a fool." The last 2 words seemed to be squeezed out of his teeth. These words seemed to be very strong and disdainful. He wanted to prove Lin Sun's unbearable and arrogant in an upright way. The reason why Chu Haidong was so confident was that he didn't believe that Lin Sun, a teenager, could pass the assessment of the qualification of a spiritual tattooist. After all, the test of the 9 Dragon Gate tablets was simply too difficult. In the past several hundred years, only Feng Qinyu had managed to pass the test of the 9 Dragon Gate tablets at the age of 17. Except for Feng Qinyu, no one else could do it. Under such circumstances, Chu Haidong naturally wouldn't believe that Lin Sun could create an unprecedented record and miracle like Feng Qinyu. Therefore, he had absolute confidence that when the result came out, Lin Sun would definitely be humiliated and suffer the consequences. Not only Chu Haidong, but most of the spiritual tattooists present also doubted that Lin Sun could do it at all. However, Lin Sun looked calm and said with a smile, "Don't worry, it won't be me." "Humph." Chu Haidong said no more. If he continued to argue with Lin Sun, he would only be annoyed by his vicious words, which was not worth it. Only by using facts could he suppress Lin Sun's arrogance at one stroke. Those spiritual tattooists of Chu family all looked gloomy, as if they would teach Lin Sun a lesson later. Especially the white-haired Chu Yunkong, who was almost driven mad by Lin Sun's scolding just now. At this time, he was secretly planning how to humiliate Lin Sun after he failed the certification. This small disturbance quickly came to an end, but the atmosphere in the palace became silent. Everyone knew that the enmity between Lin Sun and Chu Haidong would break out immediately after the certification assessment. At the same time, in another elegant and gorgeous hall in the headquarters of the commune of spiritual tattooists, a light screen appeared, displaying everything that had happened in the master-level examination hall, down to the tiniest detail. 6 or 7 old men with different appearances and clothes sat on the other side of the light screen. Yu Beidu, the chief spiritual tattoo master of the commune of spiritual tattooists, Qing Jing, a senior high-level spiritual tattoo master of the Academy of Spiritual Implements of the Empire, and Shen Tuo, the chief instructor of the spiritual tattoo branch of the Green Deer School. Every one of them could be said to be a leading figure. They enjoyed a high reputation in the Empire, and were respected by countless spiritual tattooists. The most special thing was that behind Shen Tuo, the chief instructor of the spiritual tattoo department of Green Deer School, stood a girl in a light blue dress. She had long black hair and a lazy temperament, but her appearance was extremely pure and beautiful. Her clear eyes were illusory, and she seemed to be absent-minded. If there were students of the Green Deer School here, they would definitely recognize that she was Feng Qinyu, who was known as the genius girl in spiritual tattoos. She came from the Feng family, one of the 3 great spiritual tattooist families, and her father was the patriarch of the Feng family. Now, she had become the last disciple of the dean of the spiritual tattoo branch. It could be said that this girl's identity was also extremely noble. Lin Sun's mouth is too sharp. Although Chu Yunkong's words are biased, he is still of the older generation. Lin Sun only needed to be patient for a while, and this storm would not have happened. At this time, Yu Beidu couldn't help shaking his head after seeing everything reflected on the light screen. Ho, it's easy to understand. If Lin Sun was not bold, how could he dare to beat the children of the Song family and even fight against Hua Wuyo? Qing Jing chuckled. Other big shots couldn't help but be speechless. Indeed, Lin Sun was really a thorn. No one in the Forbidden City dared to offend 2 superior forces at once like him. It just so happened that he was still alive and kicking right now, and he hadn't suffered a calamity. This was truly astonishing. I think this guy is a little rascal, Feng Qinyu joked. She also saw Lin Sun's behavior just now. Especially when Lin Sun called Chu Haidong a fool, she almost couldn't help laughing. How could Lin Sun, the head of the heart-cleansing peak, swear such a sharp tongue? By the way, where on earth does Lin Sun get the confidence to participate in the assessment of spiritual tattooist? Someone asked. Other big shots were also stunned. Yes, this boy was only in his teens. Although he was a genius in cultivation, how could a young man like him know the breadth and depth of spiritual tattoos? I heard from my subordinates that Lin Sun had passed the primary spiritual tattooist certification in Mist City. I think he is also talented in spiritual tattoos. Yu Beidu muttered. Primary spiritual tattooist? Many big shots were surprised. They didn't expect that Lin Sun really had some achievements in spiritual tattoos. Even so, it's too absurd. He is just a primary spiritual tattooist, not even an intermediate or senior spiritual tattooist. Does he want to become a spiritual tattooist at once? It's obvious that he's too arrogant and overestimating himself. Some big shots shook their heads. Indeed, it was obviously impossible for Lin Sun to become fat in one go. Especially in spiritual tattoos, there had never been a case of reaching the sky in one step. This boy may also come to join in the fun and want to test the water. I'm afraid that even he himself didn't think that he could pass the assessment of the 9 tablets of Dragon Gate. Shen Tuo's analysis was agreed by many people. This was the most reasonable inference. Hey, join in the fun? I think he's here to make trouble. This guy is not honest at first sight. Feng Qinyu pursed her lips and giggled. Her voice was soft and sweet, revealing a unique charm of a girl. Well, we'll know the result of the assessment later. Yu Beidu waved his hand, summoned a servant, and ordered, "Go and tell Ling Huxiu to start the assessment." The servant immediately took the order and left. In the master-level assessment hall, an elegant middle-aged man in a jade robe with 3 wisps of willow beard under his chin walked up to the Dragon Gate platform. This man was called Ling Huxiu, also a spiritual tattooist working in the headquarters of the commune of spiritual tattooists. Seeing his appearance, the atmosphere in the hall suddenly became solemn and silent. All eyes fell on Ling Huxiu. "Sorry to keep you waiting. The assessment will start now. There are 5 people signing up for the assessment today, namely Chu Haidong, Hu Linchuan, Lu Kuan, Yu Peng and Lin Sun." Ling Huxiu's clear voice resounded in the hall. When Lin Sun's name was read, Lin Sun keenly noticed that Ling Huxiu inadvertently glanced at him and then took back his eyes. Lin Sun couldn't help being stunned. Did this guy know him? However, when Lin Sun observed again, he didn't find anything unusual. Soon, he stopped thinking about it. In the headquarters of the commune of spiritual tattooists, even if someone from the aristocratic family came, he was doomed to be unable to hurt Lin Sun. After all, this was an important place of the empire and was under the protection of the royal family. I think everyone here is clear about the rules, so I won't explain more. Now let's start the assessment. The 5 participants don't need to adhere to the rules. Whoever is confident can go to the Dragon Gate platform first and accept the test of the Dragon Gate 9 tablet. After saying that, Ling Huxiu stood aside and waited quietly. "In that case, I won't stand on ceremony." Saying that, a gray-haired old man stood out and flashed to the Dragon Gate platform. Then he took a deep breath and sat cross-legged on the ground facing the 9 ancient tablets. Hu Linchuan. Seeing his appearance, many spiritual tattooists present couldn't help showing a playful look. Hu Linchuan was a famous high-rank spiritual tattooist in the Forbidden City. The reason why he was so famous was not how profound his attainments in spiritual tattoos were, but that he had participated in the assessment of spiritual tattooists dozens of times and failed every time. However, he didn't give up. Although he was old, he still persisted in this. Therefore, many spiritual tattooists knew him. "It's the 38th time, isn't it?" Almost, but I don't know whether Hu Linchuan can be lucky enough to pass the assessment this time. It's difficult, too difficult. His talent is limited and his potential has been dug out. It's impossible for him to become a spiritual tattooist. Alas, this guy is actually very pitiful. Listening to the whispers of the crowd, Lin Sun knew that the gray-haired old man who was the first to go to the Dragon Gate platform had participated in so many assessments. Looking at the thin figure sitting cross-legged on the Dragon Gate platform, Lin Sun couldn't help but admire him. The road of cultivation was difficult and there was something in one's heart. It was admirable that he didn't give up despite repeated failures. Suddenly, an obscure and ancient wave appeared on the Dragon Gate platform, which covered an area of 300 meters, and resounded through the whole audience. Immediately, the surface of the 9 mottled tablets, which seemed to stand in silence for countless years, was filled with illusory divine brilliance, steaming and lingering. And the body of Hu Linchuan, who was sitting cross-legged, was also covered by a bright divine brilliance. In an instant, people around could no longer see Hu Linchuan's figure clearly. They could only see a steaming glow and 9 ancient tablets that seemed to wake up from a deep sleep. The assessment began. Chapter 394. The 9 steels of Dragon Gate had a mysterious origin. It was said that they had existed since ancient times and had existed for many years. These 9 steels were regarded as the divine objects of the commune of spiritual tattooists. They contained mysterious secret realms that could show many mysterious spiritual tattoos. The most amazing thing was that if a spiritual tattooist could pass the test of the 9 steels of Dragon Gate, He would have the qualification and identity of a spiritual tattooist. At this time, Hu Linchuan was taking this test. Last time, Hu Linchuan failed at the 6th steal. I don't know how many steals he can pass this time. Someone whispered. No need to guess. After all, Hu Linchuan is old and his potential has been dug out. The hope of success this time is still very small. Some people swore with certainty. Each steal of the 9 steals of Dragon Gate formed a secret realm. In each secret realm, there were different spiritual tattoos. In order to pass the test of a steal, one must comprehend and master a complete spiritual tattoo pattern from the spiritual tattoo vision within 15 minutes. Until one passed the test of the 9 steals, he could be called a real spiritual tattooist. However, it was not easy to say. From the first steal, the spiritual tattoos contained in it would gradually become more and more obscure and difficult to comprehend. And there was a time limit for comprehending the spiritual tattoos in each steal. All of them were in 10 minutes. It could be imagined how difficult it was to pass the test of the 9 steals. Especially the 9th steal, also known as the Steal of Natural Chasm, was full of abnormal spiritual tattoos, which was like a natural chasm that was difficult to surpass. In the past, many outstanding spiritual tattooists who came to participate in the test almost failed at the 9th steal. It was no exaggeration to say that the spiritual tattooist who could pass the last test was absolutely 1 in 10,000. This was one of the important reasons why there were so few spiritual tattooists in the Empire today. Although Lin Sun also knew this, he had never really experienced it. So he didn't pay attention to other people's discussion at this moment and focused all his attention on the Dragon Gate platform. It wasn't long before a strange droning resounded, and then a golden ray of light suddenly appeared on the surface of the first stone tablet. It was like a golden bolt of lightning that was dazzling and resplendent. This meant that Hu Linchuan had comprehended a complete spiritual tattoo pattern from the spiritual tattoo phenomenon contained in the first steal. No one was surprised by this. Although Hu Linchuan had been defeated time and time again, he was, after all, very experienced. It would be strange if he couldn't even pass the test of the first stone tablet. 10 minutes passed. Hu Linchuan finally comprehended 5 complete spiritual tattoo patterns. On the first steal, 5 golden divine rainbows appeared one after another, which was magical and extraordinary. The spiritual tattooists around judged Hu Linchuan's performance in the assessment by the number of golden rainbows on the surface of the steal. As far as I know, the highest record on the first stone steal in the past years was 9 golden rainbows. It's already not bad for Hu Linchuan to have 5. Someone said. However, someone quickly retorted, how many times has this old fellow participated in the assessment? It would be strange if he couldn't do this. Many people couldn't help but laugh. Only Lin Sun remained calm. Rich experience was also a part of his strength. As the saying went, diligence could make up for clumsiness. This was not worth laughing at. In the discussion of the crowd, Hu Linchuan began the assessment of the second steal. This time, he comprehended and mastered 4 complete spiritual tattoo patterns in 10 minutes and successfully passed the assessment. Next, Hu Linchuan also passed the assessment in front of the 3rd, 4th and 5th steal, but he only comprehended and mastered about 2 complete spiritual tattoo patterns. When Hu Linchuan began the assessment of the 6th steal, many people stopped talking and focused on the Dragon Gate platform. Hu Linchuan failed several times before at the 6th steal. This time, could he make a breakthrough and pass smoothly? It was very difficult. Many people realized that Hu Linchuan's situation was not optimistic, which could be seen from his assessment results in front of the first 5 steals. The number of golden rainbows was obviously showing a trend of decreasing. Time passed minute by minute. 10 minutes passed, but there was still no movement on the 6th steal. Many people couldn't help but shake their heads and sigh in their hearts. Some people showed a knowing smile. Even Lin Sun couldn't help frowning and worrying about Hu Linchuan. Buzz. After 10 minutes had passed, rumbling suddenly resounded from the 6 stone steel, and then a golden ray of light floated up into appearance under the surprised, astounded, and disbelieving gazes of everyone in the surroundings. Unexpectedly. Succeeded. The crowd was in an uproar. They really didn't expect that at the last moment, there would be a miracle for Hu Linchuan. Lin Sun secretly breathed a sigh of relief. He didn't think it was just a miracle. Without Hu Linchuan's silent persistence and efforts, it would be impossible to achieve this. If it was a miracle, it was also a reward for hard work. However, it was a pity that Hu Linchuan finally failed in the assessment of the 7th steel. On the Dragon Gate platform, the brilliance faded away, and the figure of Hu Linchuan was clearly reflected in everyone's eyes. He stood up with a pale face and cold sweat all over his body. His long gray hair stuck to his thin face, making him look very embarrassed and haggard. However, his eyes were extremely bright, revealing endless excitement and joy, as if he was not hit by the failure at all. Because for him, passing the assessment of the 6th steel was a victory in itself. Looking at Hu Linchuan, many spiritual tattooists in the field were touched and couldn't help applauding him. Hu Linchuan's perseverance, persistence, and stubbornness were worthy of their respect. Lin Sun also couldn't help laughing. Diligence could make up for one's lack of talent and foundation. As long as one didn't give up, he could also make progress. Even if the progress was very small, it was still progress after all, not staying still or regressing. In another great hall, seeing Hu Linchuan's performance, Shen Tuo, the chief instructor of the spiritual tattoo department of Green Deer School, couldn't help sighing with emotion. Hu Linchuan is also a character. As soon as this remark came out, many people echoed. Many people in the world paid attention to geniuses, envied and admired geniuses, but few people noticed that there were only a small number of geniuses in the world, and ordinary practitioners like Hu Linchuan with average aptitude accounted for the majority. But among the vast majority, who could fight again and never give up like Hu Linchuan. It's a pity that cultivation is cruel, and the way of spiritual tattoos is even more cruel and harsh. Although Hu Linchuan is persistent, I'm afraid that his achievements in his life will stop at the 7th Dragon Gate steel. Some big shots sighed softly. This was the truth, and other big shots couldn't refute it. In the applause of the crowd, Hu Linchuan walked down the Dragon Gate platform. But at this moment a sudden voice sounded. It's important to know one's limitations. Everything should be done according to one's ability. It was Chu Yunkong. He said indifferently, "In my opinion, this behavior is no different from overestimating one's ability. It's like an ant trying to shake a tree." Everyone was stunned. Hu Linchuan had finally passed the 6th steel. How could he pour cold water on him like this? Hu Linchuan's expression changed slightly. After a while, he shook his head and turned away. He had been ridiculed and beaten for many years and had long been used to it. Hu Linchuan, although what I said is harsh, it's for your sake. I advise you to let go of your obsession as soon as possible. Don't be paranoid and hurt yourself. Chu Yunkong added. Seeing this, many people felt a little uncomfortable in their hearts. Chu Yunkong was so old. How could he be so sarcastic? This reminded them that just now, Chu Yunkong was also sarcastic and lecturing Lin Sun. Wasn't it the same? Hu Linchuan didn't pay attention to these and soon disappeared in the palace. Ho ho, you don't have the ability, but you want others to abandon themselves like you. It's really an eye-opener for me today. Suddenly Lin Sun sneered. He was really disgusted by Chu Yunkong. Not only did Chu Yunkong take advantage of his seniority, but he also deliberately sarcastically attacked others. It was a miracle that such a person could live to the present without being beaten to death. Little thing, who are you talking about? Seeing Lin Sun again, Chu Yunkong's face suddenly darkened. New hatred and old hatred surged in his heart, making him want to slap Lin Sun to death. Everyone couldn't help but be stunned. They secretly thought that Lin Sun was really bold to provoke the Chu family again and again. Who else would dare to do this? If you really have the ability, why don't you go to the Dragon Gate platform to take the test? Although Senior Hu Linchuan is not qualified, he dares to work hard. But you are old and not even a spiritual tattoo master. What qualifications do you have to tell others what to do? Lin Sun said coldly. If it weren't for the protection of the Chu family, people like you would have been killed many times. You? Chu Yunkong was so angry that he trembled all over. His face turned red and he almost coughed up blood. Others all had strange expressions on their faces, but they didn't dare to laugh because of the power of the Chu family. But anyway, Lin Sun's words still made them feel very happy. In another hall, even Yu Beidu, Qing Jing, Shen Tua, and other leading figures of the older generation looked strange. Lin Sun really dared to say that. As for Feng Qinyu, she couldn't help but burst into laughter. Her smile was like a flower bud blooming after the rain, pure with a touch of charm and naivety. She suddenly felt that Lin Sun's fearless temper was quite interesting. Lin Sun, you insulted me just now, and now you continue to provoke the elders of the Chu family. Do you really think that the Chu family dares not to do anything to you? Suddenly, Chu Haidong stood up. His expression was ice-cold, and his gaze was as sharp as a blade. He stared at Lin Sun and said word by word, "Later, let's compete on the Dragon Gate platform. Facts will prove who is really ignorant and shameless, and who is really a fool." Chapter 395. In another great hall. Yu Beidu was exasperated. "Qing Jing, are you really determined to compete with me? Your Academy of Spiritual Implements is full of talent. Do you still need Chu Haidong?" Qing Jing sighed. "Our Academy of Spiritual Implements is full of talents, but most of them are old men. What we lack most is young people like Chu Haidong. So, I won't give up." Yu Beidu widened his eyes and gnashed his teeth after a while. 3 can water spiritual crystals. "Give this guy to me." Qing Jing smiled but didn't speak. Yu Beidu was so angry that he roared in a low voice, "Plus a Sun space grass. This is already my limit. Old man, don't go too far." Qing Jing hummed and said, "I can give you all these things, but can you give Chu Haidong to me?" Yu Beidu's expression changed. "Why do you have to do this?" Qing Jing said seriously, "Talents are rare. I have to do this." Yu Beidu was surprised. "Then let's have a try. Let's see who can laugh in the end." Qing Jing smiled. "That's what I mean." Other big shots couldn't help but be speechless when they saw the two arguing so fiercely. But then again, if they could recruit Chu Haidong, it was absolutely worth it even if they had to pay some price. After all, such a young spiritual tattoo master was really rare. Only a few of them could be found in the whole Forbidden City. The reason for this was that spiritual tattoo was too difficult and not everyone could set foot on it. This also led to the scarcity of spiritual tattooists. Secondly, Chu Haidong was indeed an outstanding figure in the young generation. At least in the attainments of spiritual tattoos, very few people could compare with him. He was a rare talent. So, it was no wonder that Yu Beidu and Qing Jing, the two leading figures, fought fiercely to recruit Chu Haidong. "Shen Tua, why don't you fight for him?" a big shot suddenly said. His words made others realize that it was true. Not only the headquarters of the Commune of Spiritual Tattooists and the Academy of Spiritual Implements of the Empire could recruit Chu Haidong, but also the Green Deer School. Shen Tua said with a smile, "It's useless to argue. This Chu Haidong comes from the Chu family. If he wants to go, he must obtain the support of the clan. I don't have much confidence in pulling him into Green Deer Academy." Everyone suddenly understood. Only Feng Qinyu was clearly aware that Shen Tua wasn't giving up. He was clearly planning to watch the Tigers fight from the sidelines, and he would definitely not stop until the very last moment. This was the treatment Chu Haidong received at the moment. At the age of 20, he passed the 9 tablets of the Dragon Gate and became a real spiritual rune grandmaster. If this news were to spread to the Forbidden City, it would definitely cause a great uproar. It was normal for him to receive such special treatment. Tens of thousands of eyes were focused on him, and the radiance was boundless. At this moment, Chu Haidong, who was standing on the Dragon's Gate platform, felt proud and satisfied. He was enjoying this rare honor. But immediately, when he inadvertently glanced at Lin Sun, the previous grievances suddenly surged in his heart. Without any hesitation, Chu Haidong strode down the Dragon's Gate platform, looked at Lin Sun, and said indifferently, "Lin Sun, it's not too late for you to apologize now. As long as you admit your stupidity and ignorance in front of everyone here, I won't argue with you, lest others say that I only bully you." As soon as these words came out, the original boiling atmosphere suddenly became strange. Many people realized that Chu Haidong was going to retaliate against Lin Sun. For a moment, many people couldn't help but show pity. Lin Sun had offended Chu Haidong badly before. Now Chu Haidong had passed the 9 tablets of the Dragon Gate and created a new result. In this way, if Lin Sun didn't show some means, he would completely lose to Chu Haidong. But the point was, under such circumstances, if Lin Sun didn't use force, how could he fight against Chu Haidong? To everyone's surprise, in the face of the domineering Chu Haidong, Lin Sun didn't show any panic or frustration at this moment. Instead, he raised the corner of his mouth and showed a smile. Then, 2 words came out of his mouth softly, "Idiot." This word was so lethal, especially at this time, when Chu Haidong was already a real spiritual tattoo master. But Lin Sun still called Chu Haidong an idiot. Wasn't it too arrogant? All the people present were stunned and looked strange. Even the corners of the mouths of all the leading figures in the other hall couldn't help but twitch. This kid, how should they describe him? Ching Jing, for example, was a little displeased and said, "Lin Sun is too bold. He is as vulgar as a street ruffian. What a scandal!" Immediately, some big shots echoed, "This boy is indeed a little too arrogant. Heart-cleansing Peak will be destroyed by him sooner or later." Perhaps Chu Haidong is no match for Lin Sun in the battle, but how can he be qualified to attack a talent who has just been promoted to a spiritual tattoo master in the field of spiritual tattoos? He's still a young man, so it's inevitable that he'll be hot-tempered. Although his words are unrestrained, everything still depends on his true strength. At this time, Shin Tua said with a smile, "Lin Sun is also here to be certified as a spiritual tattoo master, isn't he? We only need to look at the result of his certification, and we can naturally compete with Chu Haidong." Immediately, all the people nodded in agreement. "I feel that Lin Sun only dares to say this because he is confident," Feng Qinyu suddenly said. Everyone was stunned and immediately shook their heads disapprovingly. How old was Lin Sun? He was just a junior spiritual tattooist. How could he pass the certification assessment of a spiritual tattoo master? Even if he were to take 10,000 steps back, he would still be able to pass the test in the end. However, how could he possibly compare to Chu Haidong? After all, the latter had just set a new record. In short, most of them didn't believe that Lin Sun could pass the assessment of the 9 tablets of Dragon Gate. At the same time, Chu Haidong almost couldn't believe his ears when he heard Lin Sun humiliating him with the word, "idiot," again. Damn it, could it be that this brat was blind? Didn't he see that he had just passed the assessment and become a real spiritual tattoo master? Didn't he see that he had created a new record? Didn't he know what was fear and what was bowing his head at all? All of a sudden, Chu Haidong's face turned livid and cold. If he hadn't restrained himself, he would have directly turned hostile and fought with Lin Sun. At this time, Lin Sun stood up leisurely, glanced around and said, "Is there anyone who wants to go third?" As soon as these words came out, the whole place was silent. Originally, there were also 2 spiritual tattooists waiting for the assessment. But seeing this scene, how dare they get involved in this grievance? What was more, Chu Haidong's eyes were staring at them like a sharp knife, as if saying, "Let Lin Sun go first. Whoever dares to compete with him will be against our Chu family." Under such a threat, the two spiritual tattooists shook their heads without hesitation, indicating that they could let Lin Sun go first. "Come on, no one will compete with you." Chu Haidong's voice was squeezed out from his teeth. "Oh, I didn't expect that you could bear being called a fool. You deserve to be the descendant of Chu family. You are really good at keeping your temper," Lin Sun said with a smile. "Little thing, are you King done?" Chu Yunkong sprang to his feet, his hair bristling with anger. "Old bastard, I can let you go first. Do you dare?" Lin Sun asked back. "You?" Chu Yunkong was so angry that his eyes almost popped out. He couldn't wait to skin Lin Sun alive and burn his bones to ashes. But in the end, he was stopped by Chu Haidong, who didn't allow him to make a sound. Because Chu Haidong knew that if he talked, he would only be taken advantage of by Lin Sun. Lin Sun was shameless, but could the Chu family be as shameless as him? What was the difference between them and a shrew who cursed in the street? Seeing this, Lin Sun smiled and seemed to be finally satisfied. He said no more and walked towards the Dragon Gate platform. The spiritual tattooists present couldn't help but be surprised. This guy really dared to go first? Wasn't he afraid that he would fail and make a fool of himself in the end? Even the bigwigs sitting in another hall had to admit that although Lin Sun's mouth was a little sharp, he was really courageous. Look, he still refused to lower his head and wanted to take the assessment on the platform, which was really convincing. However, everyone also knew that once Lin Sun failed this time, his reputation would be completely ruined. If the grievances between him and Chu Haidong were spread to the Forbidden City, he would definitely become a big laughingstock and would never be able to raise his head again. When Lin Sun passed by Chu Haidong, the latter suddenly lowered his voice and transmitted his voice in a cold tone. "Lin Sun, I'm waiting for a good show. Don't let me down." His voice was full of threat. Lin Sun smiled and said no more. He went straight to the Supreme Dragon Gate platform. "Young man, are you ready?" Ling Huxiu, who had been waiting on one side, looked at Lin Sun with a strange look in his deep eyes. "Yes." Lin Sun nodded and sat cross-legged in front of the 9 ancient steels. His back was ramrod straight. At the instant he sat down, the smile on the corners of his mouth was instantly replaced by a wisp of calmness and indifference, and he was completely tranquil like an ancient well. "Haha, I'd like to see exactly how this blabbermouth and vicious little thing will be defeated." Chu Yunkong's voice was full of resentment. "If this guy can pass the assessment, I'll kneel down and repent." "Humph, he's just a trash who only knows how to act. How can he pass the assessment? Obviously, he's just playing to the gallery. He's no different from a clown." Those clansmen of Chu clan also shouted. Other spiritual tattooists looked at each other. Although they didn't discriminate against Lin Sun, they were not optimistic about him either. Lin Sun was too young, and he was only a junior spiritual tattooist at present. How could he pass the assessment of the 9 Dragon Gate tablets? These spiritual tattooists sighed in their hearts. They just didn't know what kind of blow Chu clan would give Lin Sun when he finally failed, but... Chapter 396. In another hall, Yu Beidu was exasperated. "Cheng Zi, are you really determined to compete with me? Your Academy of Spiritual Implements is full of talent. Do you still need Chu Haidong?" Cheng Zi sighed. "Our Academy of Spiritual Implements is full of talents, but most of them are old men. What we lack most is young people like Chu Haidong. So, I won't give up." Yu Beidu widened his eyes and gnashed his teeth. 3 can water spiritual crystals. "Give this guy to me." Cheng Zi smiled but didn't say anything. Yu Beidu was so angry that he growled in a low voice, "And a Sun space grass. This is already my limit. Old man, don't go too far." Cheng Zi snorted. "I can give you all these things, but can you give Chu Haidong to me?" Yu Beidu's expression changed. "Why do you have to do this?" Qingzi said seriously. Talents are hard to come by. We have to do this. Yu Baidu was surprised. Then let's fight. Let's see who can laugh in the end. Qingzi smiled. That's what I was thinking. The other big shots were speechless seeing the two arguing so fiercely. But then again, if they could recruit Chu Haidong, even if they had to pay some price, it would be worth it. After all, such a young spiritual tattoo master was really rare. Only a few of them could be found in the whole Forbidden City. The reason for this was that the Tao of spiritual tattoos was too harsh and difficult. Not everyone could set foot on it. This also led to the scarcity of spiritual tattooists. Secondly, Chu Haidong was indeed an outstanding figure in the young generation. At least in the field of spiritual tattoos, very few people could compare with him. He was a rare talent. So, it was no wonder that Yu Baidu and Qingzi, the two big shots, fought fiercely in order to recruit Chu Haidong. Shin Tuo, why don't you fight for him? A big shot suddenly said. His words made the others react. Yes, not only the headquarters of the Commune of Spiritual Tattooists and the Academy of Spiritual Implements could recruit Chu Haidong, but there was also the Green Deer School. Shin Tuo said with a smile, It's useless to argue. This Chu Haidong comes from the Chu family. If he wants to go, he must obtain the support of the clan. I don't have much confidence in pulling him into Green Deer Academy. Everyone suddenly understood. Only Feng Qinyu was clearly aware that Shin Tuo wasn't giving up. He was clearly planning to watch the Tigers fight from the sidelines, and he would definitely not stop until the very last moment. This was the treatment Chu Haidong received at the moment. At the age of 20, he passed the 9 tablets of the Dragon Gate and became a real spiritual rune grandmaster. If this news were to spread to the Forbidden City, it would definitely cause a great uproar. It was normal for him to receive such special treatment. Tens of thousands of eyes were focused on him, and the radiance was boundless. At this moment, Chu Haidong, who was standing on the Dragon's Gate platform, felt proud and satisfied. He was enjoying this rare honor. But immediately, when he inadvertently glanced at Lin Sun, the previous grievances suddenly surged in his heart. Without any hesitation, Chu Haidong strode down the Dragon's Gate platform, looked at Lin Sun, and said indifferently, Lin Sun, it's not too late for you to apologize now. As long as you admit your stupidity and ignorance in front of everyone here, I won't argue with you, lest others say that I only bully you. As soon as these words came out, the original boiling atmosphere suddenly became strange. Many people realized that Chu Haidong was going to retaliate against Lin Sun. For a moment, many people couldn't help but show pity. Before, Lin Sun had offended Chu Haidong badly. Now Chu Haidong had passed the 9 tablets of the Dragon Gate and created a new result. In this way, if Lin Sun didn't show some means, he would completely lose to Chu Haidong. But the point was, under such circumstances, if Lin Sun didn't use force, how could he fight against Chu Haidong? To everyone's surprise, in the face of the domineering Chu Haidong, Lin Sun didn't show any panic or frustration at this moment. Instead, he raised the corner of his mouth and showed a smile. Then, 2 words came out of his mouth softly, idiot. This word was so lethal, especially at this time, when Chu Haidong was already a real spiritual tattoo master. But Lin Sun still called him an idiot. Wasn't it too arrogant? All the people present were stunned and looked strange. Even the corners of the mouths of all the leading figures sitting in another hall couldn't help but twitch. What good is this for him? Qingzi, for example, was a little displeased and said, Lin Sun is too bold. He is as vulgar as a street ruffian. What a scandal! Immediately, some big shots echoed, this boy is indeed a little too arrogant. Heart-cleansing Peak will be destroyed by him sooner or later. Maybe Chu Haidong is no match for Lin Sun in combat, but how can he be qualified to attack a talent who has just been promoted to a spiritual tattoo master in the field of spiritual tattoos? Young people are inevitably angry. Although their words are unscrupulous, Everything depends on the real strength. At this time, Shin Tua said with a smile, Lin Sun is also here to be certified as a spiritual tattoo master, isn't he? We only need to look at the result of his certification, and we can naturally compete with Chu Haidong. Immediately, all the people nodded in agreement. I feel that Lin Sun only dares to say this because he is confident, Feng Qinyu suddenly said. Everyone was stunned and immediately shook their heads disapprovingly. How old was Lin Sun? He was just a junior spiritual tattooist. How could he pass the certification assessment of a spiritual tattoo master? Even if he could pass the assessment in the end, how could he compare with Chu Haidong? Chu Haidong had just set a new record. In short, most of them didn't believe that Lin Sun could pass the assessment of the 9 tablets of Dragon Gate. At the same time, Chu Haidong almost couldn't believe his ears when he heard Lin Sun humiliating him with the word, idiot, again. Damn it, could it be that this brat was blind? Didn't he see that he had just passed the assessment and become a real spiritual tattoo master? Didn't he see that he had set a new record? Didn't he know what was fear and what was bowing his head at all? All of a sudden, Chu Haidong's face turned livid and cold. If he hadn't restrained himself, he would have directly turned hostile and fought with Lin Sun. At this time, Lin Sun stood up leisurely and glanced around, saying, Is there anyone who wants to be the third? As soon as these words came out, the whole place was silent. There were originally 2 spiritual tattooists waiting for the assessment. But seeing this scene, how dare they get involved in this grievance? What was more, Chu Haidong's eyes were staring at them like a sharp knife at this time, as if saying, Let Lin Sun go first. Whoever dares to compete with him is against our Chu family. Under such a threat, the 2 spiritual tattooists shook their heads without hesitation, indicating that they could let Lin Sun go first. Come on, no one will compete with you. Chu Haidong's voice was squeezed out from his teeth. Oh, I didn't expect that you could bear being called a fool. You deserve to be the descendant of Chu family. You are really good at keeping your temper, Lin Sun said with a smile. Little thing, are you King done? Chu Yunkong sprang to his feet and shouted angrily. Old bastard, I can let you go first. Do you dare? Lin Sun asked back. Chu Yunkong was so angry that his eyes almost popped out. He couldn't wait to skin Lin Sun alive and burn his bones to ashes. But in the end, he was stopped by Chu Haidong, who didn't allow him to make a sound. Because Chu Haidong knew that if he talked, he would only be taken advantage of by Lin Sun. Lin Sun was shameless, but could the Chu family be as shameless as him? What was the difference between them and a shrew who cursed in the street? Seeing this, Lin Sun smiled and seemed to be finally satisfied. Without saying anything more, he walked towards the Dragon Gate platform. The spiritual tattooists present couldn't help but be surprised. This guy really dared to go first? Wasn't he afraid that he would fail and make a fool of himself in the end? Even the bigwigs sitting in another hall had to admit that although Lin Sun's mouth was a little sharp, he was really courageous. Look, he still refused to lower his head and wanted to take the assessment on the platform, which was really convincing. However, everyone also knew that once Lin Sun failed this time, his reputation would be completely ruined. If the grievances between him and Chu Haidong were spread to the Forbidden City, he would definitely become a big laughingstock and never be able to raise his head again. When Lin Sun passed by Chu Haidong, the latter suddenly lowered his voice and transmitted his voice in a cold tone. Lin Sun, I'm waiting for a good show. Don't let me down. His voice was full of threat. Lin Sun smiled slightly and said no more. He went straight to the Supreme Dragon Gate platform. Young man, have you made your decision? Ling Huxiu, who had been waiting on one side, looked at Lin Sun with a strange look in his deep eyes. Yes. Lin Sun nodded and sat cross-legged in front of the 9 ancient steels. His back was ramrod straight. At the instant he sat down, the smile on the corners of his mouth was instantly replaced by a wisp of calmness and indifference, and he was completely tranquil like an ancient well. Haha, I'd like to see exactly how this blabbermouth and vicious little thing will be defeated. Chu Yunkong's voice was full of resentment. If this guy can pass the assessment, I'll kneel down and repent. Humph, he's just a piece of trash who only knows how to act. How can he pass the assessment? Obviously, he's just playing to the gallery. He's no different from a clown. Those clansmen of Chu clan also shouted. Other spiritual tattooists looked at each other. Although they didn't discriminate against Lin Sun, they were not optimistic about him either. Lin Sun was too young, and he was only a junior spiritual tattooist at present. How could he pass the assessment of the 9 Dragon Gate tablets? These spiritual tattooists sighed in their hearts. They just didn't know what kind of blow Lin Sun would suffer when he finally failed. Chapter 397. All eyes were suddenly focused on Lin Sun, with different expressions. People of the Chu family all sneered, waiting to see Lin Sun make a fool of himself. Other spiritual tattooists frowned or pitied him. Even the big shots in the other hall were looking over, and they were more or less disapproving of it. At this time, Lin Sun only felt an obscure force submerging his whole body, and his spirit felt dizzy as if the world was shaking. In a trance, he seemed to come to an ancient, chaotic world. Everywhere was gray, and there was only a stone tablet standing in the sky. It supported the sky and connected with the veins of the earth. Looking carefully, the stone tablet seemed to be infinitely high. It was dark all over, just like the spine of the sky. On its surface, there were twisted and weird spiritual tattoos like earthworms. They were as dense as the vast starry sky, shining with obscure and mysterious luster. At first glance, it seemed that there were many traces of the great way flowing on the surface of the stone tablet, which was indescribably magnificent and shocking. Lin Sun immediately knew that this was the spiritual tattoos hidden in the Dragon Gate stone tablet. But he didn't expect to see it in such a wonderful way. It was like entering an ancient secret realm and returning to the ancient times. Lin Sun took a deep breath, got rid of the distractions in his mind, and began to observe the dense spiritual tattoos on the surface of the stone tablet. In just a moment, he found thousands of spiritual tattoos, which were completely different and intricate. It was indeed too obscure and difficult for ordinary spiritual tattooists to comprehend and master a complete spiritual tattoo from it. Even Lin Sun couldn't help frowning because it was the first time he saw such a strange test. But soon, he was immersed in it. He was far more accomplished in spiritual tattoos than ordinary people, and he had been influenced since he was a child. Naturally, he wouldn't be baffled by the test in front of him. In just a moment, Lin Sun successfully comprehended a complete spiritual tattoo from the dense spiritual tattoos. Almost at the same time, the spiritual tattoo he comprehended in his mind appeared on the surface of the stone tablet, glowing with bright golden light. Lin Sun suddenly understood that as long as he nodded, this spiritual tattoo would turn into his test result and appear on the Dragon Gate platform. Just when Lin Sun was about to do so, he suddenly frowned. No, it shouldn't be that simple. After thinking for a while, Lin Sun didn't rush to do so. Instead, he focused his mind on the spiritual tattoos on the surface of the steel. Not long after, he really found the difference and comprehended a complete spiritual tattoo pattern. Moreover, this spiritual tattoo pattern could completely fit with the first spiritual tattoo pattern and turn into a brand new one. No, it should be called a spiritual array. However, Lin Sun soon found that even though the spiritual formation seemed to be complete, Lin Sun always felt that it should not be so simple. It seemed that this spiritual formation could be filled with more spiritual tattoos to make it more vast and dense. He tried to comprehend and observe it again. Sure enough, it didn't take long for Lin's new discovery to completely confirm his previous speculation. This spiritual formation could also be supplemented with new spiritual tattoo diagrams. It seems that the countless traces of spiritual tattoos on the first steel seem to be completely different, but the wonderful thing is that they can not only turn into a complete spiritual tattoo pattern, but also, as long as each spiritual tattoo pattern is combined in a special way, it can fit with each other and be completely integrated into a spiritual formation. This is like the strokes of writing. Even though there are many strokes, they can form different characters. These characters seem to be in a mess, but if they're arranged and combined, they can form words and sentences, until they transform into a beautiful article. Lin Sun's thoughts gradually became clear, and he had a feeling of sudden enlightenment. He was completely immersed in the state of comprehending the spiritual tattoos, and completely forgot that he was taking the test at this time. Time passed little by little. On the Dragon Gate platform, there was no movement on the surface of the first steel. Everyone couldn't help but look strange. Could it be that Lin Sun couldn't even pass the first test? That would be too miserable. Many people couldn't help but sigh in their hearts. Lin Sun was just a beginner-level spiritual tattooist, not even a middle-level or a high-level spiritual tattooist. How could he even hope to be certified as a spiritual tattooist? Wasn't he asking for trouble and humiliation? He was too overconfident. Haha, 10 minutes is almost up, but this boy hasn't been able to comprehend a complete spiritual tattoo pattern. What a joke. A clansman of Chu family couldn't help laughing out loud. Hey, wasn't he very arrogant before? But now, I'm afraid he can't even pass the first test. Shame, shame. After he fails, I'll humiliate him severely to avenge Haidong. Not only will I humiliate him, but also let the whole Forbidden City know that Lin Sun will become a laughingstock in the world and never be able to raise his head again. How dare he compete with Child Haidong? It's the biggest joke in the world. Other clansmen of Chu family also sneered. Especially Chu Yunkong. He clenched his fists excitedly, as if he had already seen the miserable scene of Lin Sun's downfall. So did Chu Haidong. When Lin Sun failed, he didn't need to say anything at all. Everyone present would know who was the ignorant one and who was the idiot. Lin Sun. I really don't know what to say about him. He is arrogant, but if he is so arrogant as to be ignorant, then he will be too stupid. In another hall, a big shot sneered. This is the price he has to pay for underestimating the 9 tablets of Dragon Gate. How dare he, a junior spiritual tattooist, think he can pass the test? He really overestimates himself. Some other big shots also sighed with emotion. Lin Sun's performance really opened their eyes. He couldn't even pass the first test. This was too weird. As I said, this time he is here to please the public by claptrap. Even Qing Jing couldn't help shaking her head. How could this be? Judging from what Lin Sun has done in the Forbidden City in the past, he doesn't look like an arrogant and ignorant person, Shin Tua frowned. He was a little confused. Lin Sun's performance could be described as terrible, but it seemed a little strange. On one side, Feng Qinyu nodded secretly. She had the same idea as Shin Tua. She always felt that there was something wrong with Lin Sun's performance at this time. 10 minutes were almost up, but there was still no movement from the first stone tablet. Chu Haidong couldn't help laughing. Lin Sun, your failure this time is a little embarrassing. He had secretly planned in his heart how to humiliate Lin Sun later to vent the anger accumulated in his heart. But at this moment, a sudden exclamation sounded. That's... Immediately, a burst of exclamations rose one after another and resounded in the hall. My God! What's going on? Chu Haidong was stunned. Only now did he notice that there was an expanse of dazzling golden rays of light surging into appearance at the bottom of the first stone stele. It rose ceaselessly like a golden tide that rose without end, and it seemed as if it intended to drown the entire stone stele. This, Chu Haidong was also stunned. What was going on? In the past years, there had never been such an anomaly in the 9 tablets of Dragon Gate. All the people present were shocked and at a loss. 10 minutes had passed, but there was no golden rainbow on the surface of the stone tablet. Instead, there was a golden tide surging and rising, which was too incredible. Ling Hu Xiu, who was standing on one side, trembled at this moment and his pupils dilated. He seemed to realize something and could no longer keep calm. His expression changed abruptly. In another hall, a group of leading figures reacted at the first time, but they were also shocked, speechless. Golden glow soaring to the sky. This legend is actually true. It is said that when one can fully comprehend and master the spiritual tattoo vision in the stone tablet, he can awaken the original power in the stone tablet and produce a bright golden glow, like a tide rushing to the sky. This boy actually achieved this step? I didn't expect that I would be so lucky to witness such a legendary vision come true in my life. Lin Sun is simply a freak. A group of big shots was in an uproar and looked excited. They stood up one after another with their eyes wide open, as if they had seen a miracle. Yu Beidu, Qing Jing, and Shin Tuo were also moved and excited. They understood the meaning of golden glow soaring to the sky too well. It meant that Lin Sun had obtained a perfect result in the first test in front of the stone tablet. It was unimaginable. They didn't take it seriously before, thinking that Lin Sun was too arrogant, or even stupid, and asking for trouble. But then, Lin Sun showed the vision of golden glow soaring to the sky. This was like an invisible slap in the face, making these big shots feel hot on their faces. They felt complicated, shocked, and ashamed. But they also felt very wrong. Who could imagine that Lin Sun, who was only in his teens and had the qualification of a primary spiritual tattooist, could achieve this step? It was too freaking freak. Feng Qinyu was stunned. She had felt something was wrong for a long time, but she didn't expect that Lin Sun could give such an amazing result. Even back then, she hadn't been able to do this. What a weird and wonderful guy. Feng Qinyu muttered to herself. At this time, the people in the hall hadn't recovered from the shock. Most of them hadn't even heard of the legend of golden glow soaring to the sky, so it was impossible for them to understand how abnormal Lin Sun's result was at this moment. Chu Haidong and Chu Yunkong were among those who didn't understand. Their expressions kept changing, and both of them looked surprised and doubtful. Did this guy pass the test? Brother Linghu, what's going on? Chu Yunkong couldn't help asking. Swish. All of a sudden, all eyes turned to Linghu Xiu. They were eager to know the answer. Linghu Xiu was in a trance, and it took him a long time to come to his senses. He took a deep breath and said in a complicated voice, "This is the legendary golden glow soaring to the sky." Chu Yunkong was stunned. What is this? Linghu Xiu sneered in his heart. This old guy was really as stupid as Lin Sun said. He had lived for a long time, but he hadn't even heard of golden glow soaring to the sky. However, because the other party was a member of the Chu family, Linghu Xiu explained patiently, "This means that Lin Sun got the perfect result." Hiss gasps could be heard from the audience. Chapter 398. All eyes were fixed on Lin Sun at once, with different expressions. People of the Chu family all sneered, waiting for Lin Sun to make a fool of himself. Other spiritual tattooists either pitied him or frowned. Even the group of important figures in the other hall looked over at this moment, and more or less, they were somewhat disapproving of this. At this time, Lin Sun only felt that he was drowned by an obscure force, and he felt dizzy as if the sky was shaking and the earth was shaking. In a trance, Lin Sun seemed to come to an ancient chaotic world. Everywhere was gray, and there was only a stone tablet standing upright. It supported the sky above and connected to the earth below. Looking at it carefully, the stone tablet seemed to be infinitely high. It was dark all over, just like a backbone to the sky. On its surface, there were strange and twisted earthworm-like spiritual tattoos, which were as dense as the vast starry sky, shining with obscure and mysterious luster. At first glance, it seemed that there were many traces of the great Tao flowing on the surface of the stone tablet, which was unspeakably magnificent and shocking. Lin Sun immediately knew that this was the spiritual tattoo vision hidden in the Dragon Gate stone tablet. But he didn't expect that he would see it in such a wonderful way. It was like entering an ancient secret land and returning to the ancient times. Lin Sun took a deep breath, abandoned the distracting thoughts in his mind, and began to observe the dense spiritual tattoo vision on the surface of the stone tablet. In just a moment, he found thousands of spiritual tattoo tracks, which were completely different and complicated. It was indeed too obscure and difficult for ordinary spiritual tattooists to comprehend and master a complete spiritual tattoo pattern from it. Even Lin Sun couldn't help frowning because it was the first time for him to see such a strange test. But soon, he was immersed in it. He had extraordinary attainments in spiritual tattoos, and he had been influenced by spiritual tattoos since he was a child. Naturally, he wouldn't be troubled by the test in front of him. In just a moment, Lin Sun successfully comprehended a complete spiritual tattoo pattern from the dense spiritual tattoo vision. Almost at the same time, the spiritual tattoo pattern in his mind appeared on the surface of the stone tablet, shining with golden light. Lin Sun suddenly realized that as long as he nodded, this spiritual tattoo pattern would become one of his test results and appear on the Dragon Gate platform. Just as Lin Sun was about to do so, he suddenly frowned. No, it shouldn't be that simple. After thinking for a while, Lin didn't do it in a hurry. Instead, he concentrated on the spiritual tattoos on the surface of the steel. Not long after, he indeed discovered the difference and comprehended a complete spirit rune pattern. Furthermore, this spirit rune pattern could completely match with the first spirit rune pattern and turn into a brand new spirit rune pattern. No, it should be called a spiritual array. However, Lin Sun soon found that even though the spiritual array seemed to be complete, Lin Sun always felt that it should not be so simple. It seemed that this spiritual array could be filled with more spiritual tattoos and become more vast and dense. He tried to comprehend and observe again. Sure enough, it didn't take long for Lin Sun's new discovery to confirm that his previous speculation was correct. This spirit array could also be supplemented with new spirit patterns. It seems that the countless spiritual inscriptions on the first stone tablet seem to be completely different, but the amazing thing is that not only can they form a complete spiritual inscription pattern, but each spiritual inscription pattern can also be combined with each other and completely fuse into a spiritual array after a special combination. It's like the strokes of writing. Although there are many strokes, they can form different words. These words seem to be disorderly, but if they are arranged and combined, they can form words and sentences until they become a beautiful article. Lin Sun's thoughts gradually became clear, and he had a feeling of sudden enlightenment. He was completely immersed in comprehending the spiritual tattoos and completely forgot that he was in the middle of the test at this time. Time went by little by little. On the Dragon Gate platform, there was no movement on the surface of the first steel. Everyone couldn't help but look strange. Could it be that Lin Sun couldn't even pass the first test? That was too miserable. Many people couldn't help but sigh in their hearts. Why bother Lin Sun? He was just a junior spiritual tattooist, not even a middle or high spiritual tattooist. How dare he try to be certified as a spiritual master? Wasn't he asking for trouble and humiliation? He was so overconfident. Haha, the time for drinking a cup of tea is almost up, but this guy hasn't been able to comprehend a complete spiritual tattoo pattern. It's so funny. A clansman of the Chu family couldn't help laughing wildly. Haha, wasn't he very arrogant before? But now, I'm afraid that he can't even pass the first test. Shame, shame. After he fails, I'll humiliate him severely and avenge Haidong. I'll not only ruin his reputation, but also let the whole Forbidden City know that Lin Sun will become a laughingstock of the whole world and never be able to raise his head. It's the biggest joke in the world for him to want to compete with Master Haidong. Other clansmen of the Chu family also sneered. Especially Chu Yunkong, who clenched his fists with excitement as if he had seen the miserable scene of Lin Sun's downfall. So did Chu Haidong. When Lin Sun failed, He didn't need to say anything at all to let everyone present know who was ignorant and who was a fool between him and Lin Sun. Lin Sun. I really don't know what to say about him. He is arrogant, but if he is arrogant to the point of ignorance, he is too stupid. In another hall, a big shot sneered. This is the price to pay for underestimating the 9 tablets of Dragon Gate. How dare he, a junior spiritual tattooist, pass the test? He's really overconfident. Some other big shots also sighed with emotion. Lin Sun's performance was really an eye-opener for them. It was too strange that he couldn't even pass the first test. I've already said that he's here to play to the gallery this time. Even Qing Jing couldn't help shaking his head. How could this be? What Lin Sun did in the Forbidden City in the past didn't make him look like an arrogant and ignorant person, Shin Tu frowned. He was a little confused. Lin Sun's performance could be described as terrible, but it seemed a little strange. On one side, Feng Qinyu nodded secretly. She had the same idea as Shin Tuo. She always felt that there was something wrong with Lin Sun's performance at this time. 10 minutes was almost up, but there was still no movement from the first stone tablet. Chu Haidong couldn't help but laugh. Lin Sun, you lost so badly this time. He had been secretly planning in his heart how to humiliate Lin Sun later to vent the anger accumulated in his heart. But at this time, there was a sudden exclamation, "That's?" Immediately, a burst of exclamations sounded one after another in the hall. My God! What's going on? Chu Haidong was stunned. Only now did he notice that an expanse of dazzling golden radiance was surging out from the bottom of the first stone stele, and it was rising incessantly like a golden tide that was rising incessantly. It seemed as if it intended to drown the entire stone stele. This, Chu Haidong was also stunned. What was going on? In the past years, there had never been such an abnormality in the test of the 9 tablets of Dragon Gate. All the people present were shocked and confused. 10 minutes had passed. There was no golden glow on the surface of the tablet, but there was a golden wave surging up, which was too incredible. Ling Xiu, who was standing on one side, trembled at this moment. His pupils dilated. He seemed to realize something and could no longer keep calm. His expression changed abruptly. In another hall, a group of magnates reacted at the first time, but they were also shocked and lost their voice. Golden glow soaring to the sky. This legend is actually true. It is said that when you can fully comprehend and master the spiritual tattoos in the tablet, you can awaken the original power in the tablet and produce a bright golden glow, like a tide rushing to the sky. This brat actually achieved this step? I didn't expect that I would be lucky enough to witness such a legendary phenomenon in my life. Lin Sun is simply a freak. A group of bigwigs was in an uproar. They looked excited and stood up one after another with widened eyes, as if they had seen the birth of a miracle. On the other hand, Yu Beidu, Qing Jing, and Shen Tuo were moved as well, their minds surging. They understood the meaning of the golden glow soaring to the sky too well. It meant that Lin Sun had achieved a perfect result in the first test in front of the tablet. It was unimaginable that they didn't take it seriously before, thinking that Lin Sun was too arrogant or even stupid and asking for trouble. But then, the golden glow soaring to the sky phenomenon appeared on Lin Sun's body. This was like an invisible slap, which made these bigwigs' faces burn. They were shocked and ashamed with mixed feelings, but they were also very aggrieved. Who could imagine that Lin Sun, who was only in his teens and had the qualification of a junior spiritual tattooist, could achieve this? He was 2F** king amazing. Feng Qinyu was stunned. She had already felt that something was wrong, but she never thought that Lin Sun would give such an amazing result. Even she couldn't achieve this in those years. What a weird and wonderful guy. Feng Qinyu murmured to herself. At this time, people in the hall hadn't recovered from the shock. Most of them hadn't even heard of the legend of golden glow soaring to the sky. Naturally, they couldn't understand how abnormal Lin Sun's result was at this moment. Those who didn't understand included Chu Haidong and Chu Yunkong. Their expressions kept changing, and they were both surprised and uncertain. Did this guy pass the test or not? Ling Hu Xiu, what's going on? Chu Yunkong couldn't help but ask. Swish. All of a sudden, all the people present looked at Ling Hu Xiu, eager to know the answer. Ling Hu Xiu was in a trance, and it took him a long time to recover his consciousness. He took a deep breath and said in a complicated voice, "This is the legendary golden glow soaring to the sky." Chu Yunkong was stunned. What's this? Ling Hu Xiu sneered in his heart. This old guy was as stupid as Lin Sun said. He had lived for so long, but he hadn't even heard of golden glow soaring to the sky. However, because Chu Yunkong was a member of the Chu family, Ling Hu Xiu explained patiently, this means that Lin Sun has got the most perfect result. Hiss.